Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to call this meeting to order. Tonight is the May 26th Charter Review Commission meeting here at the Alachua County Administration Building. We thank everyone for coming tonight. We thank the members for being here and ready to go. We have all 15 members here tonight, and so we welcome you, and we're glad to have you. The minutes from our May 12th meeting were fairly short, but they were distributed to everyone. And so at this time, it would be appropriate if somebody is prepared to make a motion that we accept those minutes so they can be posted. Mr. Grundy, move that we approve the minutes as presented.
Move the minutes.
All right. We appreciate that. Any other comments or corrections or anything need to be stated? If not, those in favor of approving the minutes say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Thank you so much. This time would recognize for brief comments any members of the committee that wishes to make any comments here before we get started on our official business. Mr. Brinkman.
A couple of things. In our backup, there is a letter, I believe, from the council to the Brevard County Charter Review Commission in which, I believe it's on page 10 of our backup, it states that we have already decided to place an item on the ballot. And I think it would be, well, let me just put it this way. I'd like to move that we authorize the chair to send a letter to the Brevard County Charter Review Commission clarifying that as of this date, nothing has been placed on the ballot, nothing will be placed on the ballot until June 9th. And that, in fact, I believe it's specifically about the charter amendment concerning dual vote, essentially. And that the final form of that amendment has not even been decided upon.
That's correct. Is there a second to Mr. Brinkman's motion?
Second.
Moved and seconded that we write the maker of that letter and inform him of the status, the true status of where this commission is.
Actually, I think it should be directed to the Charter Review Commission so that they're appraised of the actual
To
facts.
their charter review commission, okay.
Right.
All right, I'm with you. Okay.
I'd like to inquire why.
That's what I was going to ask.
Mr. Brinkman.
Very simple, Professor Little. I think the Brevard County Charter Commission should not suffer under any illusions about what the Alachua County Charter Commission is doing.
May I inquire, Mr.
Yes, sir, Mr. Lowe.
Is there some reason to believe that we have created a delusion, or that they are in a delusion about
Other than that letter, that's all I'm aware of. I read that statement also, and I don't know that what credence they put into that, but I certainly don't mind writing the letter if you'd like for me to.
It doesn't hurt him.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Any other comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Stringfellow. I'll
Is
come
this
back to you.
appropriate time to bring up an issue?
Let me finish.
One of the voting issues.
Let me finish on the one we've got on the floor right now, Mr. Stringfellow. Bill, would you?
I just had a few comments, and I'll defer to Mr. Stringfellow on his comments.
Okay. He wanted to talk on a different motion, I think. Is that correct?
Something totally different. Oh,
Comments on the motion.
I don't have a comment on the motion, I'm sorry.
Okay. Mr. Martin.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I was kind of getting situated, and this machine's a little loud. I'm not sure exactly what we're talking about. Could we kind of go over it again very quickly?
Certainly. The motion is for me to write the Brevard County Charter Review Commission. He's going through the same process that we're going through, and they'd recently received a letter from their attorney, and it mentioned in the letter, as I recall, the status of one of the issues that we're concerning that in the status they said was wrong at this point in time. And so the motion is that I just contact them, write them, and just let them know that we haven't made that decision yet, so they won't be under any illusion that we have made that decision. That's all. All right.
Buddy, my issue is under other business, so
Okay.
I'll wait.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I'll call on you at that time. Any other comments? Seeing none, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you very much. Passes to record a unanimous vote. Okay. Any other comments by any members that wish to make them at this time before we move to our legal counsel?
I don't know if this is the appropriate time to do it, but I did have a couple of comments on just the way the proceedings seem to be moving. One of the speakers last time, a couple of weeks ago, was Susan Baird. And she went over a whole list of things, why we ought to do things, and based it on the fact that if it's good for the city of Gainesville, why isn't it good for Alachua County? And I just wanted to remind the commission and the audience that cities and counties are different. There's 67 counties in the state, and there's subdivisions of the state. There's 416 cities. There may be 417 now. I think Ave Maria was just added, a Catholic city down in, I think it's Collier County. But cities can come and go. It's more like a business. They're like corporations. Matter of fact, they are corporations. They are municipal corporations, and their agenda, their mission, can sometimes be different than a subdivision of the state. So I wanted to clear that up and keep that in mind going forward, that counties aren't cities, and the big idea is that they're subdivisions of the state, and they have to do certain things to follow the legislature. And I also wanted to say that I disagree with most of the things that Ms. Baird put forward. One was single-member districts. My idea is that single-member districts immediately would disenfranchise 80% of the electorate in each of those districts. That's not a good idea. There are other reasons. Nonpartisan elections, and again, the city of Gainesville has that. I don't think that's a good idea either. I think that we get a lot of information about someone's principles and someone's proclivities depending on what parties they're in, and they stand on that record and go forward that way. Term limits. Another bad idea. You can see what happened in the legislature. It's been a disaster, and we already have term limits. It's called a ballot box, and it also, to me, is a bad idea because it's probably unconstitutional for policymakers to be term limited. It gets rid of any institutional memory that body might have as soon as someone is arbitrarily term limited. And I think there's a movement here to change the way we elect our officials here in Alachua County. And I want to tell you that I have seen many counties in this area and the way they run business, and we do an excellent job here in Alachua County. We have excellent local government. We provide services based on budgets. And so I disagreed with most of the things she said, except the idea that the citizens need to vote for this. They're the ones that need to decide. So our role, she thought it was just an investigative role, and we should put whatever people want on the ballot. I'm for that. People should get the government they deserve. So if I was the 8th vote and these things were on the ballot, I would have to vote yes on all of them and give it to the people so as not to usurp the citizens' authority to vote. So with all that said, I just wonder if our role is investigative, and I've considered all these things and have an opinion about them, but I wouldn't want to speak for the whole county or the whole board if I was the 8th vote that was going to put it forward. So that's all I have to say about that, and I wanted to say it last week, but I thought I'd think about it a little further before I spoke.
Well, we appreciate your comments.
Can I reply to that? Bill, I certainly agree with you, and I think that perhaps over the weeks we have put a little bit more emphasis on how we feel about an issue rather than its validity to be before the people. I'm going to vote. I'm going to change my vote under new business on the single issue, single member issue. Not because I'm convinced that's the way to go, but because I believe it's got the validity, and the number of people that are interested in this issue is incredible. So that's what I think I agree with you in principle there.
Thank you, Mr. Stringfellow. Mr. Grundy.
This is an issue that I guess we all have wrestled with over the last 8 months, and I find it interesting that there's members that think that just because we disagree with them that we didn't spend the last 8 months that we've been looking at this issue thinking about it or listening to folks. We may fundamentally disagree with them, but that doesn't mean we don't listen to them. I have asked over and over, even from folks from the argument of the other side of the aisle that didn't agree with how I voted, I haven't heard a tangible argument. However, that said, the argument of let the voters decide, I want to speak to that, that the voters have decided, and the voters have spoken. And I couldn't agree more that we should let the voters decide on that issue. I couldn't agree more. And what I want to say to that is the voters have decided. They've decided each and every election that they have wanted resident districts and to vote for all 5 commissioners. They have spoken. And not only that, I find it also interesting that we have folks that, when the process wasn't working for them, they either started 527s or giving to get rid of certain folks that they didn't like, and they want to change the process of the game and gave thousands and thousands of dollars, and they want to change the process of the game because it's not working for them. And, Mr. Commissioner Stringfellow, I agreed with you when you quoted Jack Durrance. Jack Durrance was right. Jack Durrance was a pinnacle in this community in talking about how government works and that we don't want to roll back the clock. I couldn't agree more. But the voters, the folks that come before us and say, let the voters decide. I agree with you. You're right. And we want to continue to allow the voters to decide. And they have decided and will continue to decide. They're going to decide for all 5 commissioners. But I'm okay either way if it goes forward and there's 8 votes. I'm okay with it either way. Because if it goes forward, guess what? Again, the voters will still decide. And I'm confident the voters will decide with a nay. So as far as letting the voters decide, I am torn on this issue. I'm not saying I'm for or against, but I will be open again, but I still have yet to hear a tangible argument for this matter. So I'll close with that.
All right, well, thank you very much. Mr. Martin.
I feel compelled to make a few statements. Letting the voters have a vote is important. I mean, it's the fundamentals of our democracy. It's the why people sit here on this board. Is why people are sitting out here in this audience. But I cannot believe that this commission here is simply a polling company. That what we were meant to do, or what we were charged to do, was simply count the number of heads out there that go on one side, and if the number of people who say affirmative, then that's where we go. We wonder if this body is an investigative body. With all due respect, I don't believe we've done a lot of investigation. We have voiced our opinions, but we haven't heard from any particular person who has, other than our attorney, which we do to some extent are hesitant to take her advice on so many occasions. We haven't discussed anything in particular depth, particularly on single-member districts. We haven't discussed, well, if we do that, what will be the repercussions? What would that look like? Are we going to be able to comport with the various election laws that are out there? I know there's a movement out there and desire to look at things as being very simple. I love that commercial in which they have the firefighters in Congress, and they go, does everybody want clean water? Yeah, raise your hand. But it's a little more complicated than that. And we have not looked at any of the nuances here. Popularity is a good thing. Democracy is a good thing. But there are so many examples in this country where the popular thing was simply not the right thing. And I heard so many occasions, we don't want to hear about race. We don't want to hear about that, or this. But I got to tell you, that's the one prime example. Depending on what part of the country you're in, the popular thing was simply not the right thing. And I always say that there are plenty of people of goodwill in this community that strongly believe that single-member districts and nonpartisan elections are the right thing to do. And I don't fault them for that. But please don't fault those of us who want to think about it, who want to give some appraisal of the various factors here, can do consideration. And I can't in good conscience say that we're just here to just pass through into the here. We have to look at it, and we have to look at it closely.
Thank you very much for your comments. Let me go to DJ, and then I'll come down there. Go ahead.
I was going to say my prepared comments for later, but I guess I will just go ahead and provide those now. We began the Alachua County Charter Review process on September 24, 2009. Although I and the members of this commission have done individual research, I believe that we as a body, should have received formal presentations from experts on at least one, if not more, issues which we have considered or are now considering. I know that on several occasions, concerns have been expressed by me and several other members of this commission about the need for formal reports, and it was my understanding from a few discussions which occurred at previous meetings that we would be receiving such formal reports and presentations. For example, the subject of single-member district is obviously of major interest to some of the citizens in this community. We have heard and we continue to hear from citizens on both sides of the issue. This is one of the issues that I was sure that we would receive a formal presentation from the experts in the field. Now, at our May 12th public hearing, Cleve Sharp, a citizen, quoted me as saying, and I'm paraphrasing, that I needed more information to make a decision. To clarify, what I meant was I need more information in order for me to support dismantling our current county commission district system and creating a single-member district system. I think that it's a privilege to be able to vote for all 5 county commission seats. I am far from convinced that a single-member district system would be better than the current system, and that we can reasonably expect the new system to achieve the desire for better rural representation. I just do not think that that's going to happen because of where the numbers are. Based upon my independent research, the chances of achieving better rural representation with a single-member district system is minuscule because at least 49% of the population resides in the urban area and the remainder is scattered throughout the small cities and the unincorporated area. Districts have been created for various reasons, including to provide electoral opportunity for racial and ethnic minorities who have faced a history of discrimination. Currently, districts are now drawn to protect incumbents or to provide partisan advantage. Both of these reasons are deplorable to me. It is my hope that those who did not support destroying our present district system will continue to stand firm in the face of citizens who are appealing to our emotional side. Citizens voted for and approved the high rail system, smaller class size, Amendment 1, protecting pigs, and the list goes on and on. Sometimes citizens do not think about the ramification of their vote and what that means for our community. The Charter Review Commission is charged with the responsibility of reviewing the Alachua County Charter and, if applicable, submit initiatives for placement on the ballot via the County Commission. Any initiative which is placed on the ballot should only be done after thorough and thoughtful consideration, which also includes implementation. No, we're not necessarily charged with considering implementation, but for me, the two go hand in hand, policy and how that initiative will be implemented. I, as one member of the Charter Review Commission, do not believe that any of the issues before us, at least some of them, have not received thorough study that they are due. We have had passionate appeals from both the public and from members of this body, but little substantive information which will assist in the decision-making process. So I will continue to support maintaining the status quo in some areas of county government unless I can be presented with reliable information which demonstrates that a change will give us something better than we have currently. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Appreciate those comments. Any other? Mr. Brinkman?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, Mr. Martin. I said him first, and I'll come back to you. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Couple of things. One, I didn't know we were going to discuss this so much at the beginning of the meeting, but, I certainly would never imply that someone who's voting against something issue like single-member districts have not given it careful thought. So I don't think people should imply that people who vote for it have not given it careful thought. I think both sides, I think everyone up here has given it careful thought regardless of how they voted, how they will vote now and in the future. I know I certainly have. And this issue, it's not like it's something new. It came before the previous charter review 10 years ago, and if memory serves me correctly, all the small municipalities actually endorsed this idea when some of you were, I know some of you came out to Hawthorne that were on that committee in the past, and I believe every city told you they were in favor of it. So it's not like this is something new. I think what has happened is that there has been some changes over time that has put more emphasis on this, and people are, you know, if it's only once every 10 years that you get a shot to do it, if you don't get passionate about it at that time, it's not going to happen. So I think that you're seeing people, including myself, who I don't have any particular political agenda. I really don't care who is supporting it or whatever. My reasons have been very clear. And they do have to do, in a sense, with minority, although I'm not trying to place minority as in racial minorities on the, you know, I would say that's on a totally different scale. But many of the arguments that people have made are people you made, that was just said, 49% of the people live in the urban area. Well, a majority live outside the urban area then. And I can tell you that there's a large percentage of those people who feel like that they're not represented due to the current system, which is why you'll find most, if not all, your small cities in favor of this issue of single-member districts. I will also remind you that of all the issues that we've talked about here, this is one of the few that we've had a fairly, and I don't mean any disrespect to our attorney, she's doing a great job, she's doing what she should do. But we've proposed issues and voted to move forward issues that she has clearly told us are sketchy constitutionally, potentially. This is the one issue, if I'm correct, where she has clearly stated that it is constitutional for us to vote on. So, you know, the state of Florida is telling us that it's okay to consider this. So for us to make it sound like this is some kind of radical proposal, it's just not true. It's not that radical. It's been done before. There are other counties who exist that have had this system for quite some time. Some I'm sure like it, some may not. But to imply that this is somehow radical, out of the box, way out there, you know, like I say, it's the one issue that has been clearly stated by our legal counsel, and I hope she'll correct me if I'm wrong, that this is one area that is constitutional and within the privy of the Charter Review to do. So, you know, keep that in mind as well. And I totally agree with what Mr. Richards said, although maybe for different reasons. There is a big difference between city and counties, and I spent many an hour trying to convince the body that sits up here of that very fact with limited success, because sometimes I've thought they've acted like they were a city as opposed to a county, but that's another issue. I think also that, you know, citizens, sometimes they do make wrong decisions, but they have a right to be wrong. I mean, if this issue is so disastrous, then I don't have any doubt that people will uprise if it is passed and try to repeal it within some system within the next 10 years or whatever. I'm not afraid to give these issues air to the people. And I don't really care if you look about it, and I'll say this and I'll close. You hear the word motive a lot, and I think we've watched so many of these cop shows, CSI and stuff, that motive is always seen in a negative way when you say it. What is their motive? Well, you have to have a motive to be for or against anything. Motive is not a negative word, you know. So if you're asking, well, what is the motive for the people who are supporting this? Well, I would flip that around and ask you, well, what is the motive for the people who are defending the status quo? What are they afraid of giving up? You know, there's motives on both sides. I'm not implying that one is more negative than the other. But if you're going to question what someone's motives are for pushing any of these issues forward, then I think, in all due respect, you should give equal thought to what is the motives behind the people who are speaking to you that don't want things to change. What is their motive? Could it possibly be to hold on to power? You know, I mean, we're seeing that across the country. So I just think we should approach it with an open mind, and I look forward to the debate. Thank you.
I can tell we all better eat our Wheaties before that last meeting. We're going to be here a while. Mr. Brinkman.
And I'll try to be brief, Mr. Chair. After reviewing the 7 questions we have before us currently, I have decided that I can only support the first 3. The first 2 pertain the ability of citizens to petition to put an initiative, an ordinance, on the ballot. And the third one is the one concerning amending the charter so that municipalities may opt out by dual vote, but I only support it under the language submitted to us by our council. I do not support creating a charter commission, mainly because I think the state law provides the proper mechanism to do so. It is the same mechanism that we used in this county to amend our charter to restrict campaign financing. You need to get a special act of the legislature first, and then you have a vote by the electorate of the entire county in a referendum. I oppose single-member districts because they disenfranchise, as Commissioner Bronson Martin noted, 80% of the population. I frankly am not willing to give up my right to vote for all 5 commissioners. If I can only vote for 1 commissioner, that doesn't give me any hope of having my viewpoint be the majority viewpoint. And we have a document that was placed on our places from the Gainesville Tea Party. And the second sentence says, in part, referring to the single-member districts issue, because it is a mechanism by which conservative voters may have more influence over local issues. Well, I'm sorry, but if you check the demographics of this county, there is a healthy population of conservative voters, for sure. But progressives, Democrats, whatever you want to call them, are clearly the majority in this county, have been for some time. That's why all 5 members of our county commission are Democrats. To change that system, to give conservatives more control, is to disenfranchise the majority population. The principle in the United States under the Constitution is 1 person, 1 vote, majority rules. Now, I say majority rules, but there are places where majority should not rule, and that's why we have a Constitution, to protect the rights of minorities, so that they are not subject to essentially ruled by majority. I mean, there are issues of human rights, civil rights, etc., which the majority should not be able to overrule the minority. But as far as the conduct of the legislative policy affairs of a government, it should be done by majority rule. And to me, the Gainesville Tea Party is clearly making it clear that they're attempting to subvert that and to give a minority population in the county greater control than their numbers grant them under the democratic system. Thank you.
Appreciate that very much. All right, are we ready to move on to the next item then? Yes, sir. Okay, well, thank you very much for those comments, and I think that everyone in the public realizes that we have spent a lot of time thinking and giving thoughtful consideration to these items, but yet we have 2 public hearings to go, and one of you might convince us of something that we haven't thought of or bring that to our attention, and we're glad that you're here, and we'll talk about that in just a few minutes when we get to the public hearing. But first, let me recognize Sarah Blakely, our legal counsel, who will have some general comments and also sort of bring the commission up to date where we are in the process, and then lead a discussion on the city issue, which we had told the cities we'd postpone until tonight. So, Sarah, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. This is your second of 3 public hearings that are required by the charter. You're required by the charter to hold all 3 of these and to carefully consider, as you all have for the last, since September anyway, 8 months. And you are to look at all of those issues. The Charter Commission, once you've held the 3 public hearings, the charter requires you all to make a decision on each one of the issues, and the charter says that no charter amendment shall be submitted to the election for adoption unless approved by a majority of the membership of the commission. Because there are 15 members, that means 8 members have to affirmatively vote to put an issue to the voters in November.
Chair, can I ask a question about something that I said? Ms. Blakely, you indicated that we're required by the charter to have 3 public hearings.
Right.
And after that public hearing, we are to make a vote as to what will go forward to the ballot. Is that
Correct.
Is there some time frame as to when the vote needs to take place after the public hearing?
No.
Well, there is in the fact that we have to have it at least 90 days before the general election.
Right.
Other than that?
Other than that, there is not.
Okay.
And then after you all vote to put something on the ballot, and you're not required to put anything on the ballot under the charter, but if you vote to put something on the ballot, then it goes to the November ballot, and it is ultimately up to the voters to decide whether they want to amend the charter to do what the proposals suggest. So it's a two-step process, you all and then the voters. That's just a summary of where we are in this process right now. About to start the second public hearing. Do you want me to put up on the screen all those issues, or just number 3, Mr. Chair?
If you could read by title again, I think that'd be helpful, and sort of remind everyone that what, at this point, is still on the board anyway.
We have 7 active issues that are still before you. Question 1 is a citizens' initiative petition requirement for ordinances. Let me go ahead and put that up.
I think you want to hit slideshow. It'll probably do it.
There we go. Okay. So this is question 1, citizens' initiative petition requirements for ordinance. We talked about that just a minute ago, you all did, and currently the charter provides that ordinances may be initiated by citizens' petition. The requirement is that 7% of the total number of electors in the county as a whole would have to sign a petition proposing it. This amendment proposes to reduce that to 5%. Question 2 also relates to the citizens' initiative of ordinances. Currently, there is a provision in the charter that says that the county commission cannot amend an ordinance proposed and passed by citizen initiative for 5 years. This proposal would keep that 5 years, except that for the second year through the 5th year, an ordinance could be amended by the Board of County Commissioners or repealed by the Board of County Commissioners by an affirmative vote of at least 4 of the sitting county commissioners. That's question 2. Question 3 is the one you've also been talking about, the dual city-county vote issue, and we'll spend a lot of time on the exact wording of that in just a minute. Question 4 abolishes the Board of County Commissioners and replaces them with the Board of Charter Commissioners. The idea behind this proposal is that the Constitution currently prohibits the charter from doing certain things, like providing for nonpartisan elections and for setting of salaries. It was proposed, this charter commissioner idea was proposed as a key to unlock that door to allow the citizens to make those other types of decisions, nonpartisan and salaries. And so it is a procedural kind of initiative that will allow those other things to take place either now, if it should pass, or in the future, and the charter will be changed in that way. Question 5 provides for nonpartisan elections of the Board of Charter Commissioners. Question 6 provides that the charter be changed to require the salaries of the members of the Board of County Commissioners to be set by ordinance by the rather than be the same as the salaries for county commissioners in non-charter counties, which is what is currently in the charter. Question 7 abolishes the offices and the officers of the Constitution, which are the sheriff, property appraiser, tax collector, clerk of the circuit court, and supervisors of elections, transfers all of their existing powers and duties and functions over to charter officers with the same names and the same duties, and provides for them to be elected in a nonpartisan election. Similar to the Charter Commission, this proposal will allow the nonpartisan election of those what are currently called constitutional officers, which under this would be changed to charter officers. In a brief explanation, that's where we are. We have 7 of them, and they are all...
If you could comment, because this will have a dramatic effect on about 3 questions. The status of House Bill 131, do you have any update on that, and could bring the citizens up to date on what that proposes and what the change would mean to this body?
House Bill 131 is a 57-page elections bill that passed the session at the latter part of April. It has been submitted to the governor at this point, and I checked yesterday. I apologize for not checking today, but as far as I know, he has not yet considered, adopted it, or signed it, vetoed it, or it hasn't become law without his signature. I think there's still a few days left on that. So one of the provisions in that bill, it's actually the first provision in the bill, Section 1, provides that all matters relating to elections are preempted to the state except as provided by state or federal law. Last meeting we talked, I mentioned this issue, and we talked about the idea of what does that mean for charter commissioners if all matters relating to elections are preempted to the state. Does that allow a charter commission to be elected in a nonpartisan manner? And that question comes up because there are provisions in Florida statutes that provide for the partisan election of county commissioners. So I wrote a lengthy memo that we provided you last time that suggested that the legislation preempting all matters to the state would undo any authority that the charter has to make the nonpartisan selection as part of the charter. In developing that memo and researching that memo, I talked to the Division of Elections, both the staff and the attorneys representing them. They thought about the issue for a while and consulted with others who had recently retired and concluded that all matters mean all matters, and because we are controlled by that and the statutes provide for partisan elections of county commissioners and presumably charter commissioners, because I specifically asked them about that, the charter would not be effective in making that change, legally effective in making that change. I didn't specifically ask about what would be the effect of House Bill 131 on the election, the nonpartisan election, the switch to nonpartisan for the constitutional officers as charter officers. The provisions in the Constitution are a little bit different. We talked about that last time. Certainly the Constitution implies, well, says they can be selected in another manner other than by election. And the question is, does the selection in another manner, if they're abolished, they can be selected in another manner, does that mean that they can be elected by in a nonpartisan election? It's a close question. I didn't ask them what they thought about it.
If you should sign that bill, then you can do some additional research for us before we get to the finale here. Let me comment briefly, just because I have some additional information. I had the occasion to sit down with Secretary Browning, who was the Secretary of State until the 1st of May, and under the retirement provisions of the state, he retired. He may be appointed Secretary of State next week. I don't know, but that's still up to the governor. But I asked him specifically, since the case at law was named Browning, and it came out of Sarasota, and I said, what was your intention? What does this do? And he told me that after the 2000 elections, that counties started going off in their own tangents as far as elections, and so the state felt a very serious need to pull everything back together, make sure that the process state was the same statewide. And he said, while this type of question was not one that really was on their mind, it is certainly an unintended consequence, and he felt very strongly about it, and he talked with the council up there himself about it, that this preemption law preempted counties from doing anything as far as the nonpartisan elections. And so, like, he was in contact with the governor's office and said that there's very strong proponents from the League, from the State Association of Counties, the State Supervisors of Elections, and others really highly recommending that he sign the bill because of a lot of things that are in the bill. This just happens to be one of them. But if the governor signs it, then we'll get a lot more interested in it and just see where it is. But to me, I think really and truly about 3 questions rest on the governor's signature as far as this. So I appreciate you bringing us up to date on that. All right. At this time, then, I think we're ready to turn to your research that you have done on the proposal that would require both county and city voter approval on charter amendments. So I would ask that you lead us through that discussion, and then at the conclusion of your remarks and any questions that the members have, we would certainly recognize any members of the city or the League of Cities that are here to give their view, and so that, again, we can give thoughtful consideration to this proposal. So, Sarah, if you'd do that for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And question 3 is up on the screen as I have revised it. Between the time that we talked about this question 2 meetings ago, I had a lengthy opinion letter that opined on the general issue and talked about and addressed some of the issues that were included in the Alachua League's proposal. Last meeting, I had rewritten it, and this is the language before you. Subsequent to that, the Alachua League of Cities has provided information that's included in your packet that includes a memorandum from them, an opinion letter from the law firm Gray Robinson commenting on the Brevard County proposal, which is very similar to this, as well as new language proposed by the Alachua League, revised language proposed by the Alachua League. To provide an ease of reference, I laid all 3 of the proposals side by side on this one-pager. That first column, the one-pager's titled Comparison of 2 League Proposals and CRC Council Revision. The title on the left column is the League proposal, and that's the one they originally suggested. The second one is the one on your screen that I revised, and then the third one is the language from the current proposal by the Alachua League.
Sarah, let me pause a minute. If you would put this one in that square right there. Shelley, if you can put that and turn it up on the board and blow it up as big as you could, that way everyone will know what we're referring to here as best as you can. Do you need it? Here's another copy if you need it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. She'll get it up there.
I'm sorry for it being so hard to read, but I thought it might be easier for you all to look at all 3 on one sheet of paper. My letter of May 7th raised 3 issues concerning the validity of the original proposal by the Alachua League. My comments here talk about each one of those 3 issues identified in the letter. They describe the League's revised proposal and suggest that the CRC may want to address some of the issues that I raised before, and a new one that I'm about to raise now as a consequence of their proposal. The first issue raised in my letter was retroactivity, and I can't remember which one of you asked. I think it was Mr. Brinkman. Was the intent of the League to apply the dual vote requirement to provisions of the existing charter? And the memo responds, the League's memo responds that it wasn't their intent, and they'll happily accept language that makes clear that it's not a retroactive application that they're sending. So their language certainly does that, uses the January 1, 2010 date, so that retroactivity issue is resolved. The second issue that I raised in the letter was one related to the scope of their proposal. Even as revised in the new version on the far right there, the League proposes to allow city approval of future charter amendments relating to any function, service, power, or authority of a municipality. Requires a dual vote. I pointed out in that letter, and I continue to say, the Constitution already requires a dual referendum approval of all transfers of functions, powers, and as construed by the Supreme Court, services. The legal question, and this wasn't answered in the opinion letter by Gray Robinson, nor addressed in the League's revision, is whether the inclusion of those terms, function, power, services, in the Charter Amendment will mislead the voters to believe they're voting for or against something that's already guaranteed to them by the Constitution. The Supreme Court has ruled that the law prohibits misleading voters in referenda questions and that the ballot questions must inform the voters of the chief purpose of the proposal. The term misleading, I looked it up today, means to lead into error of thought or action, especially intentionally. In a 1984 case, opinion by the Florida Supreme Court, it struck a constitutional amendment purporting to establish citizens' rights in civil actions because some of those purported to be established by the amendment already existed. If you compare that concept with what the League is proposing, I believe that the proposal is including and suggesting that people vote on something they already have that's constitutionally protected, and that may be found to be misleading to the voters and therefore subject to judicial disqualification, judicial striking from the ballot. The Supreme Court has also determined that all referenda must inform the voters of the chief purpose of the proposal. The court said that the ballot question can be defective not only in what it says, but in what it doesn't say. The League's proposal doesn't use the term regulatory power, but regulatory power is the only type of power that the Charter Amendment can affect, because those other types of powers are already covered in the Constitution. If they intend to if this proposal intends to control regulatory power on a countywide basis, I believe it should say that, because it seems to me that has to be the chief purpose of the amendment. So I'm suggesting that that you all may want to pare down the language on that issue. The third issue that I raised...
Excuse me, before we go on, if I may, Mr. Chair. Wouldn't you say that in the League proposal it references authority, and wouldn't you say the authority of the county government is to regulate? In other words, regulation and authority are essentially the same thing.
I don't know. Regulation and authority. Authority means
Well,
power.
it requires
Me.
it requires the authority in order to promulgate a regulation.
I think regulation and authority have nuanced differences between them. And I didn't make the word regulatory up, obviously.
I know.
It's directly from the Supreme Court opinion
I realize.
dealing with handgun sales, and Broward County Charter Amendment that drew the distinction between this transfer of powers and said those are really services and regulatory power, which can be done by charter amendment.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Baker, what's the case you're referring to, the case name?
Broward County. It's cited in my May 7th memo, which I can send out again next time and maybe even update it, depending on what happens tonight.
All right.
Let me continue. Okay. The third issue that I raised is that the proposal doesn't tell the voters of its intent one way or the other regarding what happens with future amendments which expressly say they are to operate countywide. Neither the Gray-Robinson letter nor the League's proposal address this issue. The right to adopt amendments to the charter are reserved to the voters of the county, not only by the Constitution, but also by the state statutes that authorize charters. I believe you know my opinion is that the League's amendment can't constitutionally control and invalidate future amendments which seek to empower the county with countywide regulatory power. The proposal should tell the voters if the intent is to take away voters' right to pass countywide regulatory power in the future. Otherwise, I think the proposal is unclear. The league used some of my charter language. This is the fourth issue that is raised in their new language. And they used some of my charter language in developing their second proposal. I appreciate that. But it does raise now a fourth issue. My proposal said that effective January 1, an amendment adopted pursuant to this charter requires a dual vote under certain circumstances. The League's revised proposal says that no provision of this charter adopted after that date certain, which conflicts with the authority of a municipality, blah, 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 requires a dual vote. Unlike the last sentence of my rewrite, you can see that for yourself, the League's revised proposal doesn't specify whether it seeks to supersede or trump what the legislature may do either by general law or by special act. And therefore, I think we should have a discussion about what the intent is, and if the intent is to try to do that, we should fully disclose that to the voters, because right now it's unclear. My role here is to advise you all of the constitutionality and legality of proposals brought forth to this body, and to suggest improvements that may make them more lawful, or in the first case lawful, on your behalf.
Ms. Blakely, could you pause for a moment? We have a question here. Mr. Grundy has a question.
Ms. Blakely, I thought when we left last time, when we left it for specifically this matter, we gave it to you to wordsmith it and what have you to make sure that it would be clarified. So there wasn't a question of intent last time when we gave it to you to wordsmith, so I'm a little confused now. Now, that wasn't one of the questions that we had, what was the intent of the dual vote issue, and now it's an issue now. I'm not understanding.
It's an issue now because the language has been changed by the League since the last time we met. My rewrite in the middle column there specifically says, provided, however, provided further, however, the limitation or countywide effectiveness of a charter amendment shall not supersede an inconsistent special law approved by the voters or a general law authorizing the adoption of a charter amendment preempting a municipal regulatory power to the county. They don't discuss this issue in their memo, and the way they've written this, if you look at the language, no provision of this charter adopted after a date certain. Well, the charter can be amended always with the vote of the electors in a variety of ways. Charter review commissions can propose something, the Board of County Commissioners can propose something, citizens can propose something, and then finally, the legislature can propose something. And if the legislature proposed something, we're going to have to deal with the issue of no provision of this charter adopted after January 1, which does blah, 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 requires a dual vote. So I think that's an issue. It's a new issue, as
I think, trying to look at this. Sorry, I'm looking at the screen. There's just below the CRC revision, council revision. I'm lost on this.
On this chart?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let me go over it again. The first column is the League's original proposal.
Okay.
The second column is what is on, well, it's on the PowerPoint. It's not on the screen now. But that is what I proposed last time.
Okay.
At the first public hearing. At that public hearing, my documents were available over the weekend and Monday and Tuesday. The League came back and said, we want to talk about this at the next meeting, and between then and now, they've come up with a revision to their proposal. And so that's what this is. That's what this document is, third column.
And under our procedures, where we are at this point in time is, if a proposal received 8 votes, what that 8 votes meant at this point was that we refer it to our legal counsel, who would provide us with some ballot language and the actual amendment language, so that then we could begin to review it. So at this time, her language is what is really before this commission. And again, we're just we're not at any final decision point, but we're studying it and we're talking about it, and we've got another proposal here, but that's why I was asked why the language was not something that they originally proposed, and that's because under our rules, we ask our attorney to come up with language that we should actually consider. All right. Any further comments?
I was just going to summarize
Okay,
all
please
the
do.
points that I made, and to suggest that the latter proposal, the last proposal by the league, should take out the misleading reference to services, function, and powers that are already constitutionally protected by dual vote requirements. Use the term regulatory power, as that is the chief purpose, and that probably the only lawful purpose allowed for this type of amendment. Specify whether the charter may be amended in the future without a dual referendum if the future charter amendment says that that's its intent is, and inform the voters whether it's also intended to limit the legislature's power either by general law or special act to have charter amendments or statutory provision authorizing charter amendments to be countywide effective without a dual vote.
Okay. Thank you very much. We appreciate that update and clarification. Are there any members of the city that I see the president of the league here, Mr. Davis? Oh, we got a new president. All right, from High Springs. Did y'all want to make any comments tonight?
Mr. Chair, I'm going to lend my time to some people who have really studied this, but
You just introduce you.
my name is Larry Travis. I'm a commissioner from the city of High Springs, and I was very fortunate to be elected to the presidency of the Alachua League of Cities last night. And
Pays well, I
it's hard to
know.
replace, yeah, it pays well. Ask Louis. But it's a couple of things. This amendment has been approved by the Florida League of Cities, the Alachua League of Cities, and 47 elected officials in this county. 47. Every city has unanimously approved this amendment. To me, that says bushels about what the people have said. Because just like you said, we are elected. And if we do something that they don't like, we won't be there. Well, our people went along with this. They're in absolute favor of this. It's called home rule. And whatever we do, that's the most important thing that we have here, is home rule, the ability to govern ourselves. And Mr. Brinkman said something a little while ago that we're not covered by state statute. Has he ever heard of anything called unfunded mandates? There are unfunded mandates that comes down to the cities. Just like a 2-in, 2-out for the fire department. We don't have a choice on that, Mr. Brinkman. The state tells us we have to do that. So we are involved with state statute. So don't think there isn't. So like I said, I'm going to pass on this, but I want to again tell you, when you have the city of Gainesville and every municipality voting unanimously to have this appear before the voters, I think that should be done. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate that very much. And
Mr. Chair, if I may
Mr. Brinkman.
respond, I did not mean to imply that cities are not covered by state statute. Perhaps you misconstrued me. But
I tell you, Mr. Brinkman, I guess I did. I pretty much heard you say that cities are not bound by state statute.
No, I actually-
I just want, again, I don't want to, I say, I'm not here to,
let's don't get into
want,
that.
I don't want to get into that.
appreciate
I
that.
say, I appreciate that. I appreciate what you said, but we are bound.
I think we all realize that cities are actually created by the state.
Yes.
And that's the only way to be there and say it. Any other representative of the city or Mr. Manager, coming forward, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. My name is Jim Drum. I'm the city manager for the city of High Springs, and I've been working with the Alachua County League of Cities as well. I guess to start off, I'd heard some comments early on that said that counties are a subdivision of the state of Florida, and they are. And I think the question said that cities are different. And cities are different, but cities are also chartered by the state of Florida. I think it's been a long time since our 9th grade civics classes, and if you all remember, we learned a lot about our federal government and our president and our Congress and our separation of powers, but there was very few classes we ever had on city and county government. We all kind of had to learn it the hard way. Usually when you were getting that building permit or you were trying to figure out how to get that playground fixed, and you had to run up against your local city council or your county commission. And so I'd just like to say that cities are a political subdivision of the state. They are equally chartered. The counties were never created to be the overseer or the superior government of cities. We are actually equally chartered. We are actually brothers and sisters more than we are the children of the county. The cities are children of the state. And we are chartered not by the county, but by the state. In fact, our city is older than some of our counties in the state of Florida. High Springs was founded in 1892, and Gilchrist County was created in 1918 as they separated from Alachua County. So some of us have been around a lot longer as cities than some of our counties. But to address a few issues, if I can, I think there's been a few questions out there. Why is it so important to the cities that we have this issue? And I think there's been some confusion, and I've talked to some members about the concern saying, well, we already have protection because there's an ordinance clause in our charter that says if a county passes an ordinance, we have the ability to negate that ordinance by passing a city ordinance. But I think we often forget how many things could potentially come about by way of an amendment to your charter. And I heard Ms. Ferguson tonight mention the pigs in the cage, and that's one of the issues that we've heard in our state constitution. And a lot of people are surprised to learn that our state constitution, which is a very important document, has a clause in there that says that a pregnant pig has the ability, has to have enough room to be able to turn around. Now, I'm sure the people that wrote our Constitution didn't include that, but the people who care very much passionately about pigs made sure that that was put on an initiative and put on the ballot, and somehow it passed. And I think our concern as municipalities is it's not a fear of our county commissioners or our county government, but potentially what other issue potentially could be put in as an initiative by citizens and then put on the ballot that could come back to have regulatory authority on our cities, passed by the voters of the county, but potentially not approved by the voters of our city, that could have an effect on us in a regulatory fashion. If it were an ordinance, we could negate it, but if it was part of our charter, like the pigs are part of our statute, or not even our statutes, part of our Constitution, we don't have the ability to change that. And as a rural community, and I know that some of these issues and these suggestions have come up before, as a rural community in North Florida, horses are very important to us. And we're learning even that there's organizations out there such as PETA and some other places around the state or the country are pushing to say a horse in a saddle or a horse connected to a carriage is inhumane treatment of a horse. I can imagine, and there's not that many horses running around in downtown Gainesville, but in High Springs or Newberry or La Crosse, you're going to find quite a few horses. What if an organization came forward? I'm sure they couldn't convince our county commissioners to say, let's have it on the ballot. But if they put an initiative forward to say we should stop all horses, riding of horses for the sake of protection of animals, something that some of you might agree or may not agree with, but if it were to be placed out there, it could be imposed on a rural community. And we believe that we should have that option of home rule. Again, we're chartered by the state. The counties were not created to oversee us. They were created to be. They were given certain duties under the state statutes, and so were cities given specific municipal duties. Our concern is potentially that these type of initiatives could come back to negatively affect us. And I guess our main concern with the wording that we see, and whether it's the wording being proposed or we can come up with new wording tonight or in your last meeting, hopefully we can get it sooner. If we look at the wording that was proposed, it's not really what we were proposing. The wording, I think, that's up on the screen. Let's see, is it up there? If you read through it, it sounds very well to start with, but I think when you get to the end, it says, except when otherwise provided in a charter amendment or by the legislature. Well, first off, I'll start with the legislature. I don't think any of the cities in the room or in Alachua County believe that we can somehow exempt ourselves from the power of the legislature. I said a moment ago, they're our parents, and so if they've created us, we're going to do what they say. And in fact, I've never seen them come forward, and maybe they have in some areas, make an amendment to a local charter. All they have to do is pass a state statute in conflict of the charter, and it becomes the responsibility of that city government or that county government to amend their charter to be able to comply with what the state laws are. Very similar, we see federal laws come down, and the state has to make changes to their laws to comply. The state will make state statutes that we have to comply with. So I'd be very surprised if they're going to come to High Springs and the state's going to initiate something to amend our city charter or come to Alachua County to amend the county charter. I think they're going to actually pass something that we're going to have to work ourselves to fix because it's our job to comply with the state legislature. In the case of the The other clause, and I think that's the concern, is that to us, as we read it as municipalities, there's very good wording. It comes back to say that if there is an issue in our city and we want to opt out, we can opt out, except when the person proposing the charter amendment says it shall be countywide. Well, if you were trying to protect horses and you wanted to make sure nobody was going to put a saddle on the back of one of them, and it's very important to you, just in this example, it could be airboats, it could be any other issue that we have in Alachua County. When you get to that last issue, would you say I'm only concerned about horses if they're in the city of Gainesville or unincorporated Alachua County, or would you say I want it to be countywide? So in other words, it really reads, we respect municipalities' rights to have their own rights and rules, except whenever we want to say, we're going to say it doesn't apply to that, and it's going to have to be in municipalities and be countywide anyway. So we kind of see that last clause as negating everything that we were working for, and I think that's the point we were trying to get across.
Appreciate that. And I think I'm sure the city's recognized that by the fact that we reconsidered this issue and brought it back, that we are interested in it and interested in home rule. I will say, though, that I have a hard time myself telling some future commission or group that they can't pass an amendment to the charter because of something that was passed sometime previously that to me, if I was writing one, I'd say, notwithstanding any other provision in the charter, this is the amendment I'm proposing. And I don't, I wait on lawyers to tell me, and that would be litigated in court or something, but I don't see how you could stop that by something we put in the charter. Because, you have that in law all the time. Notwithstanding this section of the law, this is what you do. And you see that constantly. So I'm not sure we can accomplish that. We'll talk about it some more, and I appreciate very much your comments, and I think our attorney has been given some more things to think about here and work on, but I think we're closer than we were 4 weeks ago or whatever, and at least we're still talking about it, and I appreciate your time up here.
Thank you.
Okay. Guy, did you want to be recognized a while ago? I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair,
Ring.
real briefly, on the issue of whether or not counties are, I hate to use the word superior, but I'll just use this example. The county sheriff is a constitutional officer, and that county sheriff can enforce the law in every municipality in Alachua County. The city police departments cannot likewise do that.
Okay. Appreciate those comments. Mr. Mayor, did you want to speak?
It's very hard to follow Mr. Drum. He's an excellent speaker.
He did a good job.
He did do a good job. Richard Shuttley, Mayor of Town of Micanopy, and actually, a lot of our cities are quite older than a lot of other cities. I don't know, Micanopy is one of the oldest. It is the oldest inland city, and it's one of the oldest cities in Florida. And we've been very independent for a very long time, and the county commissioners will tell you so. I'm sure that every one of them agree with that. And it's not a bad thing, and that's our whole point. Home rule is just very important to every municipality, as much as it is to the county, and that's why we are a charter county, is so that we have that home rule. And Ms. Blakely's revision here, really the provision in there that says county-wide, that is the part that seems to bother us a little, because somebody just has to insert county-wide, and it circumvents the entire issue and negates what we're doing. We would prefer to go back to our original and put the date certain in there, and we certainly have no problem with that. We were trying to compromise and come up with some language that would work for her, and I hope that she will come back and work a little more of what we want in there, just so that we're not circumvented later. That's what's really important to us, that we maintain the authority within our cities, and not to have some small group of people, 5 or 7% of the people, who maybe come up with an initiative that becomes law that covers all 9 cities, and maybe not intentionally, but it's just something that we're concerned about, and it's just that's what's important. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Appreciate you taking time to come be with us tonight, Mayor. I know we're about to move on to the public hearing here, and like Ms. Ferguson said, we've all done a lot of research, and I've read dozens and dozens of articles. One of them, which was Florida Cities Past, Present, and Future, just came out of the Quality Cities in January, February of this year. And the quote that it starts out with says, "The axis of the earth sticks out visibly through the center of each and every town or city." And that was said by Oliver Wendell Holmes, and he's a pretty bright guy. So anyway, we are working on this, and I appreciate everyone's time. All right, are we ready to move on to the public hearing? Do you want to say something, Mr. Grundy, real fast?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Two things, a couple things. I think after Mr. Drum clearly stated the position, the intent of what the Florida League of Cities is looking to have, and I would like to ask Ms. Blakely, in reviewing your proposal to us and what you wrote when you brought it back to us, I have some concerns with the way it was worded. I have no problem with the timeline or retroactively. I think that was good. It was pretty much the third portion of what was written that almost appears to be status quo and not changing anything. I think that would negate the entire point of it, and that's a concern. So I think based off what you hear Mr. Shutterly bringing to us, Mr. Drum saying to us, I would like, if whatever you come back to us with, to clearly stay along the lines of the intent of what it is they are seeking, and not so much to editorialize and clearly, that's just my perception of what I read. And if I misunderstand it, please clarify it for me. But that is what I read and what I understood. That basically is staying along with what we have now. It's not changing anything. It's not going to fix anything. And I think what they were doing, what they were trying to accomplish, was to basically compromise, Mr. Chair, taking some of your language, adopting it timeline-wise. It appears based on what they wrote, they weren't accepting the third portion of the revision that you brought to this body. So that's my only feedback.
Did
Do you want me to
you want to
comment
go ahead
on
and comment on
Yes,
this?
I would like to.
Then we'll go around.
Just based on the bare language of the original proposal, I couldn't tell if their intent was to forever prohibit charter amendments that attempted to authorize the county to operate on a countywide basis in regulatory arena. This is the first time I've heard that. I don't believe you can do that. I have obviously a lot of reservations about this. However, if you look at and it was exactly your point, Mr. Chair, that at any future time, I think if their original language or the other language passed, if a future Charter Review Commission, Board of County Commissioners, or Citizens Initiative petition said, notwithstanding this league proposal, that's law, we're going to regulate whatever on a countywide basis, authorize the county to do that, I believe that the voters have the absolute right to approve that as established in the Constitution and in the state statutes. So if you actually look at what I wrote, assuming that I'm correct in that legal view, and I think I am, but if you look at what I wrote, I go further than that. I don't let these future folks say, notwithstanding anything in the Constitution, we're going to authorize the county to operate on a countywide basis. I specifically say in the proposal here that the future chart amendment would have to specifically say that. It would have to specifically say, it wouldn't have to say notwithstanding anything else. It would have to say it's the intent of this charter amendment to operate on a countywide basis.
Thank you. Bronson Martin, did you want to make a
Right,
brief
I
comment?
think, Ms. Beckley, you went a long way to clarifying my question, but let me ask you this. Your issue was, and this may be the wrong term, a bit of a prior restraint type problem. If there were some language that were able to set some sort of standard as to what countywide impact this potential change in the charter would that be something that would soothe your mind on that issue? If there was some standard that we can put to some future commission or body can determine, well, yes, this has because of A, B, and C, this reasonably has a countywide impact. You follow what I'm saying?
I do. And perhaps if we can take the horse example I think that, if we wanted to revise this language and say that under no circumstances forever and ever, the county cannot regulate the riding of horses or the placing of saddles or any other activity related to horses on a countywide basis. But I don't think that would be legally effective if another amendment comes along and repeals that thing, or says, notwithstanding that, we're not going to let them be sold for food, for example. Because the Constitution gives to the people the right to change the charter by election. And so do the state statutes. And the statutes say there's some, if there's some need for unified countywide control, that the county charter can provide for that if the voters approve it.
Mr. Chair? Well, this is, I hear what Ms. Blakely is saying, and I was just wondering, is there any citizen or any information that would really specifically address this problem that our attorney sees? I hear, my heart hears you, but so far I'm not hearing, well, no, she's wrong about it, or this is our solution to that problem. And I was wondering if any citizen had that.
Beth, did you want to try and address something? Recognize, if you'll introduce yourself to everyone here.
Hi, my name is Beth Rollins, and I'm here on behalf of the Alachua League of Cities. I think that our primary issue is that the proposal as reworded by Ms. Blakely renders our amendment to our way of thinking meaningless. By writing into the language, the charter change, that the dual referendum requirement can be avoided simply by making a declaration of countywide effectiveness, there is just no reason to advance this proposal to the voters. County charter amendments are already countywide. And this takes the concept of dual vote and reduces it to a question of semantics in crafting future ballot language. And so our issue is primarily that inclusion, just simply including the word countywide, negates the protections that we have been working for the past 9 months to achieve. In effect, it simply gives the voters rights on one hand and takes them away with the other. I would also argue that as it is written, because it only refers to the inclusion of this countywide effectiveness in the actual charter revision and does not mention it in the ballot language, that voters in Alachua County would be going to the polls thinking that they are voting on municipal opt-out provisions, but that provision is taken away with the words, except when otherwise provided in a charter amendment. They will never see the charter language. They will only see the ballot language. So to my way of thinking, the proposal as written is misleading in that it does not discuss the idea that this can be preempted by the inclusion of a single word. If we were, and let me just be clear, we put forward a new revision not because we wanted to revise our original proposal. We believe our original proposal is legal. We believe that it is fair. We know that it has been done in other places, and we stand behind it. We put together a revision because we are attempting to reach a compromise. And so with this new legal opinion from Gray Robinson, we used the language that those lawyers supported in their opinion and included some of Ms. Blakely's suggestions as well. I think that what Mr. Martin is trying to get at is the idea that that future charter amendments might go through some kind of vetting process that would require them to advance a compelling county interest, countywide interest, or that they might be required to accomplish that interest through the least restrictive means possible. There might be some language that, that could be crafted in that. We are clearly getting down to the last hour. At the moment, what has passed back and forth has been very, very opposed in terms of philosophy. And so I would say that many of these issues are issues on which reasonable minds can differ. And many of these issues are issues that will have to be vetted out at some future point. I don't know that we can necessarily solve each and every detail in this room. We stand behind our proposal. Our revised language is there only to offer a compromise, but I think that it really is important for this body to understand that we, as the Alachua League of Cities, would not support the proposal as written by Ms. Bleakley. It does not do enough to change the status quo. It does not change the way that our cities are protected in terms of municipal home rule. And we would, if in the event that that's something that you want to do, we would not support the voters accepting it.
Okay, well, thank you.
Mr. Chair. She spoke of this charter amendment giving people's rights on one hand and then taking them back with the other hand. I'm a resident of unincorporated Alachua County. This charter amendment as proposed by the League deprives me of the right because a resident of a city would have the right to opt out. I don't have that right because I'm an unincorporated resident. This idea that cities and counties are equal simply is not factually correct. Everybody in Alachua County is a resident of Alachua County. Not everyone in Alachua County is a resident of a city. The county has the right, and only the county, to pass optional sales taxes. It has the right to pass optional gas taxes. All those are reserved by state law to the counties, not to the cities. I think the people who live in the cities and want to be able to opt out have to realize that their concerns, there's a flip side to them by the people in the county. And, the demographic information we got from the Supervisor of Elections shows that the registered voters of all cities excepting Gainesville only amount to 10% of the electorate of the county. Gainesville accounts for about 48%, 49%. So you're up to only two-thirds. So clearly, somewhere in the neighborhood of a third of the electors in this county live in the county, and they have rights too.
Thank you for your comments. My wife always gets not mad at me, but anyway, she says, why would you say such as that? But anyway, since we about beat this horse to death, I think it's time that we, since we've been talking about horses, I thought I'd bring that up. Anyway,
Peter, Mr. Chair,
I think it's time that we move on to the.
Mr. Chair, some people have spoken twice on the issue. I haven't spoken once.
So we're going to talk a lot more about it. I mean, we're just kind of warming up here.
You let him
I
speak
did want to make
twice
a
on the
motion.
same issue, and I haven't spoken once.
All right.
And I did want to make a motion.
But whatever.
What do you want? I'm not going to recognize what's your motion. Then I'll tell you if I'm. Then I'll tell you if I'm going to recognize you. You going to hold it?
Withdraw.
Okay. They do that in the legislature all the time, so I thought I'd try.
Mr. Chair, in the interest of fairness, I really think you should
Okay.
recognize Mr. Martin.
Being that he's usually short-winded, we're going to recognize him.
Well, if you remember, I'm one of the ones that proposed this issue, so I think that I ought to.
You're a maker of the motion. There's no doubt.
To speak to.
You're recognized.
I'll try to be very brief. The see, will only prolong cat calls. It's interesting to me, and I know we can't all be consistent, and I'm sure I'm not consistent on some issues. But on the one hand, we're talking about we're worried about someone opting out, but we want language that prevents them from opting out. In other words, if this language that they're discussing on this ballot, on the one hand, you're saying people are arguing against this initiative in general because they don't want people to be able to opt out of it. Yet they're proposing a compromise which allows people to opt out of it, so to speak. In other words, they're saying, okay, here's an escape clause. So that's very inconsistent to try to circumvent the language and say, to me, I agree, it kills the whole proposal if you put that forward. And I would ask again, what are we so afraid of? It's been mentioned many times in the past, Charter 1, for instance, has been brought up. Without debating the merits of that, it's a fact. It passed overwhelmingly, okay? I think what the cities are asking for is the protection of what, we talk about the majority, we talk a lot about the majority, but if you look at the founding of our nation and many of the things we hold as dearest, they're not about protecting majority rights. The things we hold dearest and the things that take the most courage are protecting minority rights, not majority rights. So what the cities are saying is that they want their minority rights, if you will, protected from something that would, in their opinion, would be detrimental to them, that may come from the county, it may come from a citizen initiative that could radically change their way of life like has been expressed. So I think we get so caught up in, on one hand, we want to protect minority rights, but that's really all what the cities are asking to do. Can you really come up with a situation where you think that there's some great issue that would be really popular throughout the county that one particular city would probably not vote for? That's probably not going to happen. And another thing we've addressed on this over and over again on multiple issues is investigative. How much time and energy have we put into it? Well, there's a limit to what this body can do. But Mr. Travis was just up here telling you 47 elected officials representing the majority of people in this county, including the city of Gainesville, voted unanimously to move this forward. That also means that 9 attorneys, there's 9 municipalities, looked at this issue and I would assume gave it their blessing to the various cities when they voted on it. So this issue by the people who are proposing it has been investigated and they have said this is an issue that we want to move forward. I would challenge anybody who's opposed to this to come up with something beyond just their opinion that actually counteracts the overwhelming investigative evidence, if you want to, that there is a large portion of the population that would at least like to see this on the ballot. So to me, the inconsistencies are something we need to strive for, and something I certainly need to strive for. Thank you, Mr.
All right. We appreciate all the comments. I think you've given us a lot of things to think about and study on in the next couple of weeks, and we appreciate that very much. And when the time comes, one of our members may propose some different language as we get down to that point, and we'll see if that happens. I hear some motions coming forward now. All right. Well, at this point, with the permission of the members, then we'll begin the public hearings. Everybody agreeable to that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, then at this time, I would call the public hearing to order. We have asked, and in case you came in a little late, we have cards that you can sign up on if you wish to speak. We would ask that you limit your time to about 3 minutes. With the help of Commissioner Martin there, he's going to turn on the red, green, and he'll turn on the green light, then it'll go yellow, and then it'll go red. And at red, we'd appreciate very much if you'd start to, and try to wrap up your comments so that everyone can have an opportunity to speak.
Did you ask them to sit down when it goes red?
Well, we'll try to do it in a nice way. Okay. But anyway, at this time, then the public hearing on, and right now we have 7 proposals before us. But we certainly, and the question that we're trying to decide is whether or not to put those proposals on the ballot, to recommend that they go to the ballot. And then the county commission, of course, they have to put them on the ballot if we recommend or put them on there. But we would, that would be the proposal that we would take up later on. But anyway, at this time I'd recognize Laurie Newsom. Laurie, are you still with us? All right, there you are. Great. Good to have you with us. Please come forward and talk.
Hi, I'm Laurie Newsom, and I've spoken to you as individual members and as a committee as well. And I wanted to turn the commissioners' attention to the two amendments, nonpartisan commission seats and single-member districts. Yet again, you have before you a list of 192 Alachua County residents that were very firm in their resolve to see this, please, on the ballot. I think Ms. Ferguson mentioned a time of, a necessary time of investigative process to see the pros and cons of all these amendments. In this, in light of these two amendments and the interest that it has generated in the citizenry, I think it's only fair to allow the voters to have that same luxury of time to investigate these amendments to see if, in fact, they want this to become part of the charter. We're just asking, please, let the voters decide. Thank you very much.
I appreciate you coming forward. Something I didn't say, I meant to say, and that is, regardless of anything that you may have said, we may have said up here previously, I want you to know how much we appreciate y'all coming tonight, and we're listening. And even though we're a deliberative body and we're not an elective body, and in the end we have to make a tough decision on some questions, the fact of the matter is this public hearing is very important to us. And what you say is whatever you'd like to say, and it's also the way that you feel and the way that you understand the problem. And while that may be different than where we are now, this is your chance to change our opinion on that. So I did want to first just thank everyone for coming. Mayor Soderly, did you want to speak again? I had your card here. Have you already spoken?
I've already.
Okay, all right. Commissioner Travis, you also had a card. You're okay? All right. Mr. Drum, you also had a card? Okay. Beth Rollins, you also had a card. Okay. Ozzie Angelo, did I say that right? All right. If you'll come up and introduce yourself to us, then we'll have it right.
Thank you very much. My name is Ozzie Angulo.
Thank you. Sorry about
Close enough. I guess my only concern with this is just that there's been, I've seen some of the previous meetings, and there's definitely a lot of debate that's still going on. There's still a lot of nobody can really say, okay, let's move this forward, let's not move this forward. My main concern is for the voters. If this does go on the ballot, and we do have voters come out, will they be comfortable? Will they know enough about what's going on here to make an intelligent decision? I feel that maybe there's a lack of focus on actually trying to bring this out to the public right now and say, hey, listen, this is something that's possibly going to come down here in November in just a few short months, and we need to discuss this, and you need to know what this means. Because just from being here and, like I said, seeing the other meetings, it just seems that there's still so much debate over this. I don't know if putting this on the ballot or even making a decision to put this on the ballot in November is the right step at this point in time. I mean, I guess there's still another meeting, and we have as far as the what with the charter review, as far as what we're discussing, whether I think all seven. Honestly, I mean, I'll be honest with you. The issue number 3, I had to look at that like 4 or 5 times to get a sense of what's being discussed, and just, and this is something that I'm just now becoming aware with, and I know that, and I'm someone that I regard myself as pretty involved in local politics and pretty in tune, or at least much more than most of the residents that I talk to, that I associate with. And a lot of them ask me, hey, it's time to vote, or it's election time, which way are you voting? And that happens a lot. A lot of people are just not kept up to speed with what happens in our local elections, and they turn to people that they think are very well informed. So I just think that, we need to take just a minute and make sure that this is getting enough attention, and we're addressing all 7 of these amendments, and that the public, the residents, are aware of what's going on and are well informed before we get to a point where we decide should we put it on the ballot or not. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Appreciate that very much, Mr. Angula. Did I say it right that time? Angula. All right. We appreciate that. I appreciate you giving me some help on that. And I will say, I understand, just a very brief comment here is called Gib Kerper. Gib, are you still here and want to speak? Gib left? Okay. We fully expect, no matter what issues we put on the ballot, for there to be forums in the fall by the League of Women Voters and editorials and op-eds and so forth and so on. So we fully expect that process to go forward. Charles Kelly. Mr. Kelly? Appreciate you being here.
If I don't get hurt getting up here. I'm Charles Kelly. I'm the town manager for Micanopy. I'd like to address the home rule issue quickly. It's a primary state mandate, and I think it's an issue that is really about a zero-sum game. There's only so much power, and there's only so much money, and the money is related to power, and it's how it's shared. And I think that the home rule issue is to just clarify that status and make sure that each party understands how the power and money should be shared in this particular county. And I think to the extent that that can be accomplished, it should be, as opposed to letting it be ambiguous. If it's an issue that's being brought before you by this many people, all 9 cities and all of their elected officials, then it appears to me to be an issue that should be addressed. The second issue is a single-member district. District apportionment is not really an issue which has become before you before. That is something that could be easily accomplished today. Statistically, it's not a problem. Unless you want to gerrymander, it's not a problem. So, and it's not an issue that this board needs to address in any case. The issue is single-member districts, not how they're apportioned. A unicameral legislature is basically what we have. And if we had a national legislature that was unicameral, it would be the House of Representatives. The House of the Senate was a compromise for the Royalists, and so we have both. But we don't have both at the local level. Now, Gainesville attempted to accomplish that by having some district-wide and some single-member districts. But when you have the majority of the members, this single-member districts at the minority and the district-wide as a majority, you're still, in effect, creating the Senate, and that's what's ruling. That's what the same body's electing them. If you go back and look at the statistics, statistically, in Alachua County, the same people are electing your same commissioners. You can cut it any way you want, but that's a fact of life. If you just look at how they're elected on a county-wide basis, you can say, I'm not getting a choice but one member if I have a single-member district. Your 1 member out of 5 or your 1 member out of 7, if they're all single-member districts, give you a better vote than if you're all voting for one person. I can tell you, if you go back and look at your numbers and look at how those votes go in, the same people are electing the same commissioners. And if you look at the source of the commissioners, you'll find that is the case too. It's simply a power issue. Those that have the power don't want to give it up. And I can't blame them that. I mean, that's the fact of life. That's human nature. But it's your job to see that doesn't happen. If you're voting for and happy with 5 commissioners that are elected, then basically you're just a member of that statistical body that's electing them. It doesn't mean that you have more of a voice or less of a voice. If you're voting and none of your people are ever elected, it means you're not happy. But it all boils down to how the numbers work, and if you divide it up and let each district have a representative, you will have a much fairer balance in your electorate than you will as it stands today. Thank you.
Mr. Kelly, I just wanted to thank you for giving the children, those 30 kids above your office, those quarters.
Yes, sir. Thank you. We appreciate it, and it's good for us, too.
We have a lot of good citizens that assist this county, and we appreciate all of you. Mr. John Beck. John, please come forward.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm just a citizen of rural Alachua County, and at this point I feel like I'm a disenfranchised citizen. And I'm speaking on the single-member districts. I would implore you, ask you to put this on the ballot and let the people decide. I totally agree with the last speaker, as far as having a representative that we can elect. Mr. Brinkman said, well, okay, he's got 5 people that he is basically electing and are representing him. So he's got the power in his group. He's happy with that, and I understand that. But we're a representative form of government, and so if we set up single-member districts, then each of us will have a representative that we can go to and will represent us. And that's, really the way I believe that our government was designed and set up, so that we all would have a voice. And I would just ask each and every one of you to go ahead and put it on the ballot, let the people decide, and have, if they want to have their own representative, or if they're happy with what they've got right now.
Appreciate it.
That's it. Thank
Appreciate you coming by. Thank you so much. Craig Lowe, Mayor Lowe. He's here. All right. Come forward. Good to have you with us tonight.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Commissioners. Mr. Chair, my name is Craig Lowe. I'm Mayor of Gainesville. And the City of Gainesville does support the dual vote concept, and we did pass a resolution unanimously to that effect. And then sort of going into my own personal opinion with respect to the CRC Council revisions, I do see that as actually undermining the actual intent of the proposal. And so I would urge caution and consideration of that. And then again, speaking on behalf of myself, with respect to nonpartisan elections, having run a nonpartisan election, I found that voters do want to know what the party affiliation of a candidate is. And actually, nonpartisan elections does place an obstacle to that voter knowing that information. And I think it's it's an unfortunate thing when we place an obstacle to voters finding out the information that they want in choosing a candidate. With respect to single-member districts, there was a reference to the City of Gainesville and how we are constructed. There are 3 at-large members of the Gainesville City Commission, one of which is the mayor, and then there are 4 district commissioners. So every voter, regardless of what district they live in, votes for a majority of the City Commission. With respect to single-member districts, having completely single-member districts in the county, a majority, an overwhelming majority, actually, of county residents live in either Gainesville or the urbanized area. And so if you were to, unless you were to engage in some sort of very unfair gerrymandering to disenfranchise voters in the city of Gainesville and the urbanized area, you would wind up with something similar to what you have now. However, those commissioners would only be accountable to a segment of the county, and therefore there would be less likelihood that they would take into consideration countywide interests. That if there is an issue dealing with, say, High Springs, but their district didn't include High Springs, would they be as responsive to the needs of voters in High Springs? Thank you very much for allowing me to make those comments.
We appreciate you coming down tonight.
Thank you for your service.
Really do. Cleve Sharp. Cleve, there he is. Good to have you with us tonight.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and board members. I am Cleve Sharp, local Gainesville. First of all, I'd like to say that this last agenda that you all put out was very enlightening. It has to be for all of the citizens to see the editorials that was put into this agenda. I'm going to read you one. I'm going to put on my glasses. But anyway, going back to what one of them said, it said the right thing was by Mr. County Commissioner Ronnie Long. Said that the Renaissance started with single-member districting was put into place in the city of Gainesville. Now, we don't have to go out of the county to get information about single-member districting. We have a model right at the city of Gainesville. It's unique. We haven't had no problems with it. My thing is put a single-member districting on the ballot and let the people decide. You know, it's been going on too long. I've been into single-member districting for, I guess, 20 years, and it doesn't make sense. We're better than that here in Alachua County. We got people on this board here that know better than not to put single-member districting on the ballot for November. And I'm going to give you a thing that happened when I was on the Charter Review Commission years ago in the 80s. Something came up about the administrator of the county. That's what it was called then, the administrator. Now it's called manager. I wanted them to be consistent with the city of Gainesville so the people wouldn't be confused about administrator at the county, city manager at the city. Now they understand it. You'd be surprised how many citizens I've talked with don't really know who represent them. This is true. They don't know. They know you, buddy. Everybody knows you. By the way, you're doing a good job. But anyway, I'll close by saying single-member districting, how many you put is single-member districting, how many you put it at large if you want to do it like that. Just get it on the ballot. November. Thanks so much.
Appreciate you coming down, Mr. Sharp. Sure do. Darlene Buffalo. Appreciate you coming.
Good evening, Commissioners. Darlene Pafalo, thank you for the invite. I'd just like to reiterate a few things. I won't take the 3 minutes or whatever it is. First of all, with the single-member districts that we've been talking about, I think it will give people more of an opportunity to run for office if you had a smaller area that they would go and be represented for the vote of the district. I think also because campaigning is so expensive, it would get less expensive if you just had to concentrate on one district where you lived and represent that district as a single-member district. I also think that more people would run for office, maybe some of you gentlemen and ladies on the board here, because it would be less expensive and you get more people involved with it too. That's one of the issues I'd like to just say about. And then the last thing I would like to say is, right now, as we know from the newspapers, our community is probably 50-some% Democrat and 40-some% Republican, and everybody's happy with that number. Mr. Brink, you're saying it's not?
It's greater than that.
Okay, whichever the numbers are, but if it ever goes, and someday I think it will, reverse over, then we may want to go with nonpartisan that way instead of partisan now. So I just think that you have a tough job, appreciate what you do, but I think you leave it up to the people to make a decision on what they would like to do. I think those are the two hot issues right here. And of course, I think also home rule is really important. When you listen to McNopie, and High Springs was a wonderful presentation on what they're going through. So that's my point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming tonight. Stafford Jones. Stafford, come on
down. I am primarily for letting the voters decide on issues like this. One of the members said tonight, talked about the rights of the minorities. And that particular member didn't really seem to be, in this case, interested in protecting the rights of the minorities. But I would counter that we don't really know which is the minority and which is not until the public has had the debate. The public might be very well interested in this issue. There's nothing dangerous about this issue of single-member districts. I'm sorry. There's nothing dangerous about this issue. This isn't asking you guys to put on the ballot a socialist dictatorial form of government, which I'm sure there's probably some in Alachua County that would love that. But that's not what this is. This is an issue that is very mainstream. It has been tried in Alachua County, in the city of Gainesville. It works there. It's been tried in other counties. It works there. And there are some real positive benefits to it. One, somebody has just mentioned that it could increase the quality, it could increase the choice when it comes to elections by making elections less expensive in some cases. The other things that it could possibly do is make commissioners more bound to the needs and wishes of the citizens in their own neighborhoods, in their own region of the county. I mean, can we doubt that maybe Newberry is different than downtown Gainesville, than the Duck Pond area, or different than, say, the area of Windsor? The needs are different. And right now there is no real connection between the voters and the commissioners that represent them. they don't really have one that they feel like they can call their own. This is a comment I've heard from a lot of people. So there are lots of reasons to put this on the ballot. Let the voters have the debate and in the public forum and choose in November. And if the minority, if the majority, if Mr. Brinkman wants to protect his ideological majority, then he's got nothing to fear. All we're asking you to do is put it on the ballot, and if Mr. Brinkman is right, the voters will shoot it down. But if Mr. Brinkman is wrong, the voters will vote for it because they want something different. Let them have the debate. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Stafford. Appreciate you coming. Dion McGraw.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, and to all of you all who are serving on the CRC. My name is Diane McGraw, and I represent the 4As. I'm the co-chair of the Elected and Appointed Officials Committee. And speaking on behalf of the organization, we believe that if it's not broke, then why change it? My thing is, we keep talking about single-member districts, but show us how that looks. I've gone out and talked to people in the community on behalf of the organization. They want to know how that looks. We're not saying that it's totally and we're angry or we're disagreeing up against everything that you're saying, but the thing is, show me a visual picture on how that is going to look. Right now, you keep saying, put it on the ballot. But before, educated people who are out in the community, who look at politics, they want to know how single-member districts are going to look. Right now, you have single-member districts on the city. And unfortunately, I live in Northwest Gainesville. But as far as East Gainesville, every time you turn around, things that they want to see in their community. Again, everybody wants to represent their community. Understand that. However, East Gainesville, let's take Hatchet Creek, for example. They wanted that in their community. But did they get it? Because 4 other single-member districts got a chance to vote. So understand that when we start talking about single-member districts, then who's going to be left out? Who's going to be left out? And then when you talk about, again, we believe you cannot deal with single-member districts and nonpartisan elections till you deal with abolishing the county commission. That term, when I talk to people in the community, they said, boy, that's a harsh, mean term. But to me, you cannot do anything with that until you deal, about as far as single-member districts and nonpartisan elections, till you deal with abolishing the county commission. My thing is, if you want to go to single-member districts, then we need to see how that is going to look. Because anybody who knows I'm involved, I represent this organization, I'm going to city commission meetings, I'm always in the community, and East Gainesville has been at a disproportionate. It's not fair to the things that people want in their community, they're not getting. So that is the fear people have for going to single-member district. You ask us to go back to a system from 1954, and we don't believe as an organization that that is fair. So if we've been talking about this since September, but we need to see a picture. How are single-member districts going to look? And the other thing is, people ask me was, well, now in the surrounding municipalities, they have city councils and representatives. Well, what is their purpose? How are they helping their community? Because I know the current county commission, they meet sometimes 5:30, 6 o'clock, and stay to 11 o'clock at night meeting with people in the surrounding municipalities. So I see that as trying to work together. They're working together. But my thing is, when people are asking, which is a good question, what is the purpose of the leaders in Archer, Newberry, whatever? I take Alachua, for example. Alachua has been very progressive in building their own tax base and things of that nature. But please, if you're asking someone to agree and change the single-member district, we would like to know how that looks. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate you coming down tonight. Let me just briefly, just so everybody will know what the law is, it's not particularly Ms. McGraw answering her question, but the only districts that we've got right now to go by, because they were drawn in equal in population to what the county commissions are, districts are currently now. This group doesn't draw districts. We can't do that. If this matter should come back before this group, and if it should go to the ballot, and if the people should vote for it, the county commission would draw those districts. I just want to be sure that everybody understands we don't draw districts. All right. Let's see. Charles Chestnut III. Mr. Chestnut, are you still with us? Yes, sir. All right. I didn't see you back there. Thank you. Appreciate you coming.
Turn off the light, John. There we go.
He's just.
If you're going to be a light man, we're going.
That's right. Don't start it yet. All right.
This is the most power I've ever had.
I know it's just gone to your head.
Let's start.
Power to the people, brother.
Yeah, brother.
Let's start it over so the commissioner would have an. All right. Start it over.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
Thank you so much, Chair, and to the commissioner serving. You remember? Does anybody remember me being here before?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Then I don't have to really go through that that I went through at that point. I've been in Gainesville basically all of my life, and I've seen all of the changes take place. I've seen some good and some bad. Let me just clear the history just one more time. One more time. In single-member districts, it is not in the best interest of the people of Alachua County, not just the East Gainesville, and not just West Gainesville, North Gainesville, or South Gainesville. There are people that have been elected from the rural area to the school board, to the county commission. There's no question about that. So anybody that has a city that has an entity of government takes care of its own business. What we're talking about is the unincorporated area. And that becomes the responsibility of the county. When we tell cities, hey, come on now, if you're getting ready to annex, don't create any enclaves. But they create the enclaves. And then everybody points to the county. Do you want to provide, we need these services, we need that services. And we've seen that throughout the county. They can do what they want to do. I'm just trying to find out, by having a rural representative doesn't necessarily mean that the unincorporated area are going to be served any better. The county has to take a look at the entire county. Now, I'm not getting into the fiction between the cities and the counties for various and sundry reasons, but by the same token, single-member districts have not necessarily worked in the best interest of all of the citizens of Alachua County. And this is not the word minority, I'm hoping and feeling that that's being used in terms of overall population. Okay, yeah, okay, that's as long as I'm clear on that one. So if that's being the case, then individuals have been elected from small municipalities, or those areas, and in the urban area, because everybody in the urban area is not a citizen of Gainesville and is not a part of city government. So it just doesn't make any sense to me to break something that has been working thus far in the best interest of all the people of Alachua County to be dealing with this issue now. So if you put it on there, then all you're doing is creating another political fight, and come on, and we'll vote it down.
Appreciate those comments. Surely do. Appreciate you coming. Another former county commissioner, Tom Coward. That's right. These two.
We're certainly honored to have these two gentlemen tonight, I'll tell you that.
Tom Coward put in 16 years, was it, Commissioner Coward? 18 years. I'm sorry, yeah, and that's right. You filled the unexpired term of Representative Martin, and then you were followed by Commissioner Chestnut, and he put in 12 years, I believe. Appreciate you coming. Good to have you with us tonight. Good to see you.
Well, Commissioners, Chairman, this is not the first time that this has come up. It came up when I was on the commission, and I studied it thoroughly, and I can tell you now that single-member district is not in the best interest of the county as a whole. It may be single-member district may work maybe in Miami or some large populated areas, or areas, large areas where people not able to go to the various areas. But you're disfranchising some people from electing the county commission. When I was on the county commission, I wanted to make sure that I would represent the people in Alachua, High Springs, Hawthorne, Micanopy, wherever the case may be. But when you set up single-member district in the county of this, if you elect a person from, say, High Springs, that does not necessarily mean that that person going to represent the person in Micanopy or necessarily in Hawthorne or any other areas. And if you decide you want to have when we had the single-member district come up before, they said the people in the rural area were not represented. So what are you going to do? You're going to have a rural representative, so that representative may be from High Springs, but then you have a ring around the county to take care of all of the municipalities around the county, which is a part of the county, and that representative is not necessarily going to represent the people. The people in High Springs are not going to represent the person in Hawthorne. So if it's not broke, why try to fix it? And for the life of me, I want to know right now, what is the rationale for changing this? What is wrong with it? What is broke with it? Can someone tell me, and I can argue with them and let them tell them tonight? The single-member district is not going to solve whatever problem that you have. So if if the single-member district is not going to solve a problem, why creating another problem which you're going to have if you have single-member district? And I heard someone say working in Gainesville. Well, why should the Alachua County, why should the city of Gainesville be a model for Alachua County? Alachua County is unique, and I would like to represent the people as a commissioner of all of the people in Alachua County. And the people in Alachua County should want to be able to talk to any one of the commissioners who they represent and who is elected. But when you take one single member from a particular district, that person is only one vote and not going to necessarily represent the whole county. I would urge you to study this. And the last thing I want to say, you're putting something on the ballot and asking the people to vote on when the people really don't have a real understanding of the effects of single-member district or district at large. Why should you ask these people to do that without explaining to them what it's all about? And they elected the commissioners to come before them in order for them to represent them. So let the commissioners represent those people, because they don't want to spend the time of researching as you would do it. I would urge you not to even consider putting this to the people to represent them.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Coward. Good to have you with us tonight. Walter Willard. Mr. Willard? And if you'll stand over by the microphone so that we can hear you, Mr. Willard, we appreciate that.
Is that what he said? Oh.
Mr. Willard, if you would go to the microphone, we'd appreciate it very much. You can just hold it up there. We can see it.
Going back to the Battle Knuckle days, Knuckle Dragon days, sidearms. Walter Willard, Gay Pioneer, develop ice. This is my coat of arms. It's a sword. It runs from the northwest pole to the northeast and the southwest pole. That's how mine look. 47 votes, huh? Do we know how many of them still living? Suppose 5 of them had since deceased. and the other 42, half of the other 42 to switch their votes. Just suppose now, just suppose. I know it's expensive to ride away to Gainesville. I know that. I'm not talking about everybody up there that rode the horses and your camels. I'm just talking about the ones that drove the cars. I'm not talking about the horses and camels now. 'Cause that's what we're going back to. I know the county commission's not going to get up there and work for nothing, and they're not going to get up there and work for free. But then we don't need charter commissioners sitting up there drawing no Federal Reserves either, and downloading no poem. No, sir, we don't. We have to keep somebody responsible. Those school board members, if they had know what was coming down the pipe, they'd be here fighting for their jobs too. More Miss Barbara Sharp being here fighting for her. I seen Mr. Paulson back there earlier. I don't know where he went to. If Rod said Renaissance started with single member districts, Renaissance started in Europe. It started in Europe. So it's only natural to begin again over in Europe and come back to the United States. Yeah, you're right. Like Mr. Brickman said, 1/3 of the people stay in the unincorporated area have rights too. That's a T-double-O with an exclamation mark, not a T-O with a period. That's 2 O's with an exclamation mark. We have rights too. I stay on the fringe. I stay on the fringe of the unincorporated area. So I stay on both sides of it. The bullets. The Colt 45s, they're going to be carrying 4 Colt 45s, they're going to be carrying 9mm. The 9mm will put you away for a while, but it won't kill you. It won't kill a zombie. No, they'll heal up. They'll go somewhere until they heal up, and they'll come back and get you. Stronger than before. You got to have a silver bullet. That silver is expensive. Them silver bullets is expensive. Let me tell you. So I know you're not going to get up there and work for nothing. County commissioner's not going to get up there and work for nothing. So we between a rock and a hard place. Catch 22.
Okay, Mr. Will, we appreciate so much you coming down and sharing with us tonight.
Thank you, and I'm not going to work for nothing.
Thank you so much, sir. Ken Cornell. Mr. Cornell, okay, great. Please come forward. Appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the County Review Commission. My name is Ken Cornell. I come to you as a private citizen. I am a small business owner. I own Cornell & Associates, a real estate partner. I'm a Gainesville native. I was born and raised in Gainesville. Went to Twilliger, Fort Clark, Buchholz, brainwashed, and went to the University of Florida. Came back and am now raising my family in Gainesville. I am a member of the BCC. I'm also a member of the Gainesville-Alachua County Association of Realtors. I'm also a member of a local nonprofit organization, GSA, which was responsible for getting the Jonesville Park off the floor. And finally, and most importantly, I'm a husband to my bride, father of 2 boys, and that's what drives me on a daily basis. As a result, I'm very interested in our community and the lifestyle that we are trying to make better. And it's here that I'm coming to you tonight as a private citizen. I guess you could say I'm all in. I have been, I will be, and I will continue to be all in. I've listened to, I guess this is the 4th or 5th meeting that I've attended. I've listened to various proposals that are on the table, and with my 3 minutes of allocated time, I'd like to go ahead and weigh in on some of these proposals and perhaps offer a new proposal, if you're willing to consider one, to the commission at the end. So first of all, I'm in favor of proposal question number 4, creating a charter commission that will allow local control of certain items that are important to our local community. I'm opposed to proposal question number 5, nonpartisan elections. I believe we have a 2-party system, maybe a 3-party system, Democrats, Republicans, and with the rise of independents, as evidenced by our current governor, I think that's an effective way to elect our public officials and fund the campaigns and the various issues associated with it. I'm opposed to, I guess it was a previous proposal, term limits. We need strong elected officials to face and to force an individual out of office at the local level that the public continues to elect and understands our local issues, to me, just seems kind of silly. And then we've had a couple of county commissioners who I appreciate coming tonight that are evidence of that. I'm in favor of question number 6, local decisions with regard to salary amounts. I have no opinion as to whether the current salary is too much or too little. I believe you must pay a competitive salary to attract and retain the best and the brightest. We may need to give our commissioners a raise. I don't know. But I believe local demographics should determine local pay. Finally, and this may surprise a number of my peers, I am opposed to the proposal for single-member districts. I have witnessed the arguments for this idea, and I've given that it gives better representation to districts to which you live. Respectfully, I completely disagree with this argument. As a matter of fact, I cross district lines on a daily basis in both my work and in my recreational activities. To have a say as to all of the elected officials, in my opinion, far outweighs just being able to vote for one. It's this point that I would like to offer a progressive, I believe it's a progressive new proposal for the commission to consider. I think you ought to consider eliminating all district lines and hold elections for 5 open seats at large. You see, I want the best and the brightest representing our community. Many of you are sitting up there. I trust that as a community we can elect the best and the brightest. Maybe I'm an idealist, I don't know, but I believe technology has leveled the playing field. I believe in this time of instant communication with Facebook, Twitter, texting, our population is instantly up to speed on world, national, and local levels, local issues. They have the means to weigh in on these issues and help our elected officials come up with and craft productive and immediate solutions to our problems. We need the best and the brightest in these seats, and I believe the elimination of all district lines is a worthy consideration. Thank you all for listening to my input and for your time in serving on this Charter Commission. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Appreciate you coming down, Mr. Cornell. Appreciate that very much. Susan Baird. Susan? Good.
Again, my name is Susan Baird. Thank you. And I do want to thank all of you, like you thanked us for being here. You guys put in much more time and effort than any of us over here. We try to, but we really appreciate everything in your past experience as well. And I also very much appreciated this booklet that you passed out the last time that had so much valuable information. And I was overwhelmed by how much information there was about single-member districts and the importance of it being put on the ballot. And that it's, again, one more piece of information and evidence that there are so many people that have so many strong opinions on either side that it should be put on the ballot. And one of you gentlemen, I can't remember which one over here, had mentioned the last time that this is not a democracy. It's true. We do not go ahead on every single issue. That I thought it was you, to go ahead and raise our hand and say, well, what do you all think? It's a republic, and we all choose that best representative that will go ahead and fight for what he knows is our best interest. And here, as we saw here, it says single-member districts makes commissioners more accountable to the voters in their district and give these voters true representation. Therefore, with that information right there, and I know that there's allegedly other information, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. Well, sometimes you don't know if something's broken or it could be better. And there's a book, Good to Great, and sometimes good is the biggest enemy of greatness because you don't want to try something new that might be better. And I think that a lot of the communities are overwhelmingly going to single-member districts, and other areas have actually been forced to go to single-member districts so that they can go ahead and get true representation. So we want the opportunity to choose our representatives that would have our best interests for those decisions, so therefore we would please ask you to put that on the ballot for the people to choose. And also, as far as nonpartisan, the nonpartisan is a very important issue, and it is interesting that people say, well, you should vote Democratic or Republican or Independent. Actually, you should vote on the issues. It should never matter what your party affiliation is. It should matter what the issues are, where you stand, and not worry about what letter is behind your name. And lastly, but not least, is term limits. I don't believe in professional politicians. And I think the term limits would help us not have professional politicians so that we can go ahead and get some new information, some new ideas, and make sure that we get the best representation again, which is, again, one of the key elements to having a good society. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for coming tonight. That is all the speaker cards that I've had. Does anyone else that has not spoken wish to address us that might not have known about the cards? Okay, well, seeing no hands go up then, at this time, we will then close the public hearing. Close it again with the thanks of all of us commissioners here for all of you coming down and taking your time out of your busy schedules to share a few minutes with us and a few ideas with us. And I can tell you what you've said has been very helpful and very thoughtful, and we appreciate that very much. With that, we'll close the public hearing, and we'll turn to the members only now for other business. And I know Mr. Stringfellow had asked previously to be recognized at this time, so I'll recognize you, Mr. Stringfellow, if you wish to be recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've really rethought and thought about this single-member district issue, and according to the parliamentary procedure, I believe if I'm on the winning side, I can bring up the issue again. Is that correct?
You may, on the prevailing side, yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, I'd like to bring the issue up again. Excuse my voice, I'm about to lose it. And ask for a revote on the issue.
Are you saying it's a motion to reconsider, but it's reconsideration of the 5-member, is this what you're talking about, the 5-member single?
No, I'm talking about the single-member district.
Right.
Yeah.
5 commissioners, single-member district,
Yes.
not the 7 or anything
No,
like that.
that's right.
5-member, okay. All right, well, it's been moved that we reconsider that question. He was on the prevailing side. Was there a second?
Point of information.
Let me hear if there's a second. Is there a second? We have a second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. On the motion to reconsider, it is a debatable motion, so I'll recognize.
Point of information.
Yes, sir.
I asked earlier to make a motion as well before this, and you weren't going to entertain that. So I'm going to ask, if you're going to entertain one, I would ask that.
I can't hear you. Would you speak
I'm
into
going
the
to
mic?
recognize
please?
you next. Just he had.
All right. Well, I'd appreciate that if we're going to be equitable in doing that. That's all I'm asking. Mr.
We're
Chair.
going to recognize anyone that wants to be recognized from here on out. Just Mr. Stringfellow is first in line. All right, we have a motion and a second to reconsider the question of single-member districts that was placed before some time ago. Those in favor of the motion to reconsider, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
Let's have a roll call, please, ma'am. This is only on the question to reconsider.
Only on the question to reconsider, okay. Mr. Ackerman? No. Mr. Brinkman?
No.
Ms. Ferguson? No. Mr. Glazer?
Aye.
Mr. Grundy?
No.
Mr. Irby?
Aye.
Mr. Little?
Yes.
Mr. Obronsi Martin?
No.
John Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Richards?
No.
Mr. Stringfellow?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
No.
Mr. York?
Yes.
I have 8 yes.
You have what?
8
8
yes.
yes, 7 no. Record the vote as 8
That
yes,
should be-
7 no, so the question is reconsidered. Then we'll place that back before the membership. Sarah, do you have something that we can put back up on the screen so people know what we're... Thank you.
Mr. Irby, could I ask you a
Yes,
question,
sir, Mr.
just
Mark.
for clarification?
Okay.
Which one are we?
That's what I'm going to have.
We're going to clarify that now, right?
I'm going to clarify that now. That's correct. And since it was not a new motion, but a motion to reconsider, it will be the, can you turn that for us, Shelley? Is Shelley up there? Okay. All right. There you go. This is the question, Sarah, if you'd read the ballot language there so we'll know what we're talking about. And this is the one that,
Can't do both.
okay, I'm sorry. I was going to read off
I only
there.
have one copy. What this is the question that you all voted down 2 meetings ago. It was called question 1 at the time. It provided for 5 charter commissioners. This has been the charter commissioner rubric. And also provided that no more than 2 could extend to the county line.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, on that point,
Brinkman.
by specifying that only 2 districts may extend to the county.
Excuse me, it's 3.
All right. In any case, by specifying a number of districts that extend to the county line, is the charter not attempting to control redistricting? And I don't think that's the proper province of the charter. In other words, I'm asking, is it proper or constitutional to put in a specification as to the nature of the districts?
That's a difficult question. The statute allows the Board of County Commissioners to put the issue of single-member districts on the ballot for the voters. It doesn't seem to limit their ability to determine things such as how many will extend to the county line. We are a step back from that authority. The CRC is a step back from that authority. And I've concluded just in my research and thinking that because the county commission does that by resolution, and you can require them to adopt a resolution, therefore you can make them put the issue on there.
But I mean, if we specify 3 districts have to go to the county line, you've certainly constrained what districts could be drawn. Certainly, you eliminate consideration of the current districts that exist.
I'm not familiar exactly with the
Right
current
now, all
districts.
5 go to the county.
All 5 go to the county line, all 5 originate, have a point of origin in the city of Gainesville.
It's not clear. There's no, off the top of my head, I'm not sure.
Okay. This motion, though, is on the floor. If anyone would like to make an amendment or anything on it, I recognize Ms. Martin.
Well, I have a question about which motion it is that Mr. Stringfellow wanted to bring back. There were 2 motions about single-member districts. One was assuming that the county commissioners became charter commissioners, and then there was another motion that stood aside from that that was regardless.
Okay.
And I don't know which.
Well, I had in mind that the 5-member, but I would accept an amendment, yes.
The first motion, not the one that has to do with charter commissioners, right?
Okay.
Okay,
I
so this
understand.
is not the correct motion.
So the motion then that Mr. Stringfellow, and I'll clarify this with everyone, is under the state law. And that's why I was trying to get to it a while ago. Under the state law, 5 county commissioners under single-member districts.
Yes.
Nothing to do with charter commissioners. And I don't recall right off, and we can talk about whether or not that motion, I think it also had the 3 districts on it.
It did.
It did, okay. All right. Knowing that we're talking about the county commission, not under some charter commission scenario, does anyone object to us considering, that would be the motion that's before us then? That's our understanding then. As a county commission under state law with that one scenario that adds the 3 districts extending to the county line. Okay, we're all clear now. Thank you very much.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yes, sir, Mr. Martin.
And for our attorney, please.
Please. Mhm.
If you have the single-member district initiative or charter amendment is the proper word, that is independent of the charter, the other question 5, I believe it is. If question 5, if both of those questions appeared on the ballot, and the single-member district passed, if it's not tied to 5, it would stand on its own, correct?
Yes, I think so.
if 5 still passed, then it would still stand on its own, and whatever body is ultimately becomes the county commission would then be charged with abiding by the districting of single-member districts set aside. So it by itself would not be contingent one way or another. It would be, so to speak, the law of the land, regardless of whether you had charter officers or you maintain the current system. Is that correct?
The rule of law is that if 2 amendments pass at the same time, as long as they're not inconsistent, then the courts will harmonize them. And I don't believe these are inconsistent in a fundamental way, because you're talking about how they're going to be districted on the one hand and what they're going to be called on another hand. And that what they're going to be called establishes some power in the charter to change some other things unrelated to districting.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And that, I can tell you that, of course, it's all somewhat clouded by that House Bill 131 that's being out there right now, but part of the Charter Commission proposal at the end, I think, and part of the transition says that any time the word county commission is used shall be substituted charter commission. So I think what you're saying is right.
Right, but this particular issue is not relevant if it's on its own to House Bill 131. Because
No.
it has already been stated,
That's
I
right.
believe, by our attorney, that it is constitutional if it is in fact placed on the charter.
Now, there's a statutory provision for this. What I was saying with that, just to
I
clarify,
understand.
was that House Bill 31 may knock out that whole charter proposal for a number of us.
Well, that's one reason why I think for those people who are in favor of this, that I for one, support it standing alone, because to me, it's the one issue that has clearly been labeled as passing constitutional muster, and so I personally would be in favor of it standing alone.
All right.
I
Thank
just
you
wanted
for
to
your
clarify
comments.
it. Thank you.
Further
May I
comments?
ask for a clarification of the motion?
Commissioner Little.
Is this, and maybe this was clarified, does this motion include the three districts, only 3 shall go to the line, or is this just open?
No, 3 districts go to the line. It's it was on that proposal.
May I ask a question, because this matter has concerned me. I was on the Charter Review Commissions that created the present situation in the city of Gainesville. I think it was the chairman of the commission. And one of the things the city of Gainesville attempted to do during that process was to satisfy the community that the city was doing its best to make sure that specifically black voters would have a good opportunity to elect a black commissioner. And now the primary speakers against this have been black citizens. And I wonder, is the view here that somehow that this is going to make it harder for a black person to be elected to the county commission? Or is it, a little twist was put on it by one of the speakers here, is it that the east side of town, the town where our black population is predominant, even though it might have a black commissioner, will simply be ignored by the other 4 members? And can anybody articulate for me, Mr. Martin used the notion motive a while ago, the motive or the thinking here on this thing? Because I think that is a serious question, and it's one I would like to have a little clarification on.
Yeah.
Anybody that wants to speak to the question?
Anybody?
I'm sorry, Mr.
No.
We'll call on you in a little bit here.
Mr. Little, are you referring to?
I recognize Mr. Martin here.
When you're saying point of clarification, are you asking for the people who are opposing single member to clarify their motives, or the people who are supporting single to clarify their motives? Or
No, I'm
both?
asking what is the reason that one is against it? If there is a reason connected with race, I would like to know it, because that is a serious matter in my mind.
Oh, okay. Only if it's connected to race.
Any other reason, but I was specifically interested in the fact that all of our black commissioners are against this, Charter Review Committee members. Well, whatever. And the speakers, Commissioner Coward, who wants to speak, and Commissioner Chestnut, who did speak, whom I respect greatly. I've served with Tom Coward. I served with Mr. Chestnut when he was on the school board. So I just wonder if there is a factor here that's not been expressed.
Mr. Martin had asked to be recognized first. Sorry. He wanted to answer this question.
You know,
Bronson Martin.
Excuse me, I'm trying to gather my thoughts here. One, I think there are several things going on here at once, and it's not any one particular factor that weighs most heavily. Do I feel there's a sentiment that there are racial undertones to this? I believe that there may be, as most things in life, unfortunately, they are. As far as, I can't speak for the intent of anyone who's out there. I'm going to best let them do that.
Yeah.
My particular objection can be best articulated in an example. Presently, there's an issue in Alachua County, as before the county commission, dealing with how best to use bed tax money. A number of constituencies, both rural and urban, are putting proposals toward the county commission as to this is what we think would be a good use of this bed tax money. One particular proposal comes from a rural community, Newberry, to establish a series of baseball fields to attract and support Little League baseball, with the idea that that's going to increase tourism, which is the main purpose for bed tax money. All right, so to me that sounds like a good idea, not just for Newberry, but for Alachua County in general. If we were to move to single-member districts, and when there's only so much money in the pot, and when you have each group contesting for money, I guarantee you that a commissioner that has to be elected from a certain district, regardless of whether that idea that comes from a district that they're not involved in, they're going to vote for that idea that comes from their district. Case in point, a district, a hypothetical district that involves the city of Gainesville. And the University of Florida, the big 800-pound gorilla in this community, decides that we want that bed tax money for whatever. I can't see any reasonable person who has to be elected out of that district that is encompassed by the University of Florida ever supporting the idea from Newberry. And you got a situation where there will be no consequences to that commissioner for that, because that commissioner will never have to go see anybody in Newberry. They're not going to have to be answered to them because they're not getting elected from them. Yet they have the same power to vote over that. That's my concern. That this idea, while emotionally sounds real good, but as Commissioner Ferguson had indicated time and time again, I hear the notion about evidence. There's overwhelming evidence. 47 people voted for this. 187 people signed a petition for this. To me, those are allegations. They're not evidence that this particular thing would work better. I am more than open to hear any evidence that's out there. But I'm just hearing that this makes me feel good to think this would give me a better representation. Now, to go back to what you're saying, do I think there are undertones here? Yes, unfortunately, I do believe there are undertones. And that this community, for whatever reason, tends to be more progressive or democratic. And certain people who have conservative values, and there's nothing wrong with having conservative values, feel that they are disenfranchised. Now, that word has been bandied around a lot. And I got to tell you that, given the history of this country, that is not a word to be bandied about lightly. You cannot, let me be clear here. when you compare the movement 20 years ago to have single-member districts, it was because of a very specific reason to serve as a remedy for disenfranchisement of a protected class, which has a very a specific and legal definition here. It's just not anything as a protected class, and it's not just African Americans. It's women, Hispanics. It's a number of those things, and I think that's kind of embroiled in there. And some African Americans in this community are seeing that. Well, this is 10 years up, and we're not liking the way it is right now, so we want to change the game. What's the rationale behind this? I heard some individual who gave a testimony indicated that if the commission were not comprised of who were presently on the commission right now, this may not be an issue. Now, personally, my motivation is what I described before. Have I heard individuals say that's an issue? Yes. Can I honestly say that those individuals have no merit to what they're saying? No, I cannot. But I'm going to have to let them speak to exactly what and why they feel that way.
Mr. Grundy.
You know, all of this, and Commissioner Little, with all due respect, I think this is a smokescreen to talk about making this an issue of race or color, because not all of the commissioners of color, again, I'm Hispanic, so not all of the quote-unquote black commissioners have voted on this. This is not about, let me be clear, crystal clear. This issue has nothing to do with someone's ethnicity, color, or background, because I voted against it. I guess appearance is what it is, but I voted against it having nothing to do with ethnicity. I have said clearly, and I'll state it to the public, this is about arithmetic. You may not agree with my stance on it. You may say, well, he's only voting it because he wants to protect people how they look. Well, Commissioner Martin and I are not of the same background, so that doesn't hold water. Okay? And Commissioner, the commissioner down there, are you going to say that if he voted against it? Commissioner Stringfellow originally voted against it. He's not African American. Are we going to make this a race issue? I mean, this is not about race, folks. This is about, we just simply fundamentally disagree on the approach. I have said clearly, again, I have a problem with, I want to ask the commissioners who gave money to this 527, Commissioner York and Commissioner Glazer, when they give money, they have a problem with the process. Are we going to call them out and say, this is about race too? I don't think it is. They simply have a problem. They think that there needs to be change. Well, we don't. I mean, it's a fundamental view. This has nothing to do with race, has nothing to do with class. We just don't agree with the folks that like you. And I think I've said it to folks that I have met with. So for anybody that says that this is making it a race issue, I can't speak for the entire black community. I can't speak for the entire Hispanic community, and I'm not going to. But I have spoken to citizens of all backgrounds, and I talked to them of all political persuasions, Republican, Democrat, Tea Party folks, and they'll attest, they have met with me, and I have met with them. And, there's folks in the rural, Commissioner, there are folks in the little rural area that feel represented, that don't feel that they are being left out of this persuasion, and they're not here. My question, I'm going to pose a question to you. You brought this forward to us as a body. I think we called it the Commissioner Little Compact. And then you said to the public, well, I'm going to vote to send this forward. But I don't know if in the end that I'm going to vote for this. Both you and Commissioner Irby said that. So I'm going to ask you, let's be honest with the public. If you're going to vote to send this forward, are you planning on voting for this? Because you felt like originally that there may not be any changes that need to be made to the charter. That's my question to you.
Let me step in. You don't have to answer that because we still got a public hearing to go yet.
Yes, but let me comment here. What I was interested in is the question of whether there is a belief that we're going to throw a barrier into there being representation in the county commission by specifically black citizens. That's what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in much of what I heard. And what I've heard is, so far, is no. That's not our reason. We don't see a barrier, which makes it easier. My only question here is to whether to vote to put it on the ballot or not. And so I'm hearing from our members here, no, that's not We don't see that as a barrier. It's other political matters. Fine. That satisfies me. Now, Commissioner Coward may want to speak. Maybe he's got a different view on it.
Well, we're going to try. I mean, we've had the public hearing, and I'm afraid we'd be here a long time if we open this up. We're going to have another public hearing, so let's just see where we are, and that gives us, if this should pass, it'll give us a couple of weeks to study on it and get some more information on it, and then we'll go from there.
Mr. Chair, excuse me. Well, see, that's a fair question, Commissioner Little. But here's also one of the underlying problems here. And I think many of us had indicators in the past. A lot of those questions we don't know the answer because we haven't really investigated that thoroughly. I think Commissioner Grundy had pointed out, if we do this, are we going to have Voting Rights Act violation problems? And have we, I think, former Mayor Hanrahan indicated that she spoke with, and I forgive me for not knowing this professor's name, but that Professor Wald was like, I don't really know if this is going to pass muster. So to answer the question, I don't know. And part of, I think, a lot of us are concerned about, and why I don't think we should just be simply a pass-through entity, because part of my calculus would have to be, if we put anything on the ballot, we're going to be exposing the county to litigation, which is going to cost money, which is what I hear is concerning citizens. Well, we are wasteful in our government funds. We shouldn't be haphazard in what we put in on the ballot, which may expose us to litigation. I don't know. As far as that, once you get that very specific question, is this going to expose us to some kind of litigation? I don't know the answer to that. And maybe we should take some time to figure that out.
Appreciate those comments. I had John Martin, then DJ, did you want to be back next? Okay, John Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Mr. Little can certainly speak for himself, but I understood it the way he explained it the second time, actually the first time. And I share his same viewpoint. I think that, I've been very clear that I'm in support. I've been for single members of districts for a number of years. But if someone certainly can make a compelling case to me that it would, in fact, put up some of the barriers that Mr. Little put out there, said, and I applaud him for the courage to ask that, because so often we shy away from actually talking about these kind of issues in public, and people get very defensive about it. So I can honestly tell you that if I felt, and I think if you look at my history, not only mine, but people always invoke my father, but I guess I'll do it as well. My own personal family history, if I truly felt that was going to happen and someone could make a compelling case, I would reverse my decision in a heartbeat, because that is not what motivates me. I can only speak what is motivating me. And what motivates me is actually what Commissioner Martin used as a point for Newberry. I can tell you, because I've never been on the city commission of Newberry, but I've sat with people from Newberry, and I've been on small city commissions a number of years. Actually the argument that you made is exactly the argument that the small cities are making now, because what they would tell you is, because everybody is elected countywide and they're elected from this pool of voters, that there is no compelling reason to go to Hawthorne to provide some reason, because you can lose Hawthorne overwhelmingly, and if you win certain urban areas around Gainesville, you're going to win the election. You can literally lose every vote in a district you live in, the majority of that district, and still win. And that's really and it's happened. It has happened, okay? It has happened. I can show you. I won't get into personal things, but it has happened where people have won the districts they live in and not been on the county commission. It has happened, trust me.
I'm sorry.
I know it too well. But anyway, what I'm saying is, and I didn't interrupt you.
And I apologize. Go ahead.
The argument you made is exactly what a lot of the small cities would counter with the same argument. They would say that under the current system, there is no compelling reason for a county commissioner that is running countywide to go to any particular, especially a place where there are very little votes to be had. So I'm not accusing the county commission currently of that. I'm simply saying that is one of the arguments. One other thing I want to say that I don't think anyone has brought up yet in any of these issues. All of us were appointed by the current county commission. The current county commission appointed all of us. I don't think it's really relevant who appointed you. I think it's pretty, people could find out pretty easily. But we were all, and the reason I bring that point up is that commission thought that this group of people, and I understand there were multiple people applying for this, was a good representation. Whether or not it is, I don't know. But I would assume that they thought this was a good representation of what the county, I applaud them for not saying, okay, what would be in my best interest? You know, who would support the things that I believe in? I applaud them for the courage to appointed this varied commission. And so let's keep in mind that, you know, that when we're talking about if it ain't broke, don't fix it, that if they wanted everything to go, that we got a very smart group of county commissioners in this county right now. If they were absolutely wanted no change, I would tell you that there are members on this committee, me being one of them, that probably would not have been appointed. So I applaud them for doing that, you know. So keep in mind that this commission was appointed by our current county commission, who wanted, in my view, based on who was appointed here, a very diverse mix of views, which is what I think we have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let me recognize any member that hasn't spoken that wishes to speak at this time before we sort of start.
Well, yeah,
Mr. Wood.
I'll take the time
All
to
right.
speak. And again, I find out that there is another person on the commission here that lives rurally. And yes, I do live in a very rural part of the county. And, you know, I haven't heard any convincing argument yet for single-member districts. I haven't heard one single thing that would tell me that it's to an advantage, because when you talk about representation in the rural areas, we haven't had a problem in my area about getting to any county commissioner when we needed to. And voting for them or whatever, I mean, even today, I have a solicitation to come to some party that people are holding for a candidate, which is very interesting because, you know, I think that they look at the value of the Micanopy-Evanston area and the value of being able to be represented, particularly by 5 people who I get to vote for. I think the question that Professor Little is asking here, it really is a question of disadvantaged people. I think that's what we're looking at. I think that the whole thing is that we're questioning if single-member districts are going to really represent the disadvantaged. And in my opinion, if we go to single-member districts, it won't. Because I think what we're going to see is that some form of gerrymandering, and that question, you know, that word has come out before. No, we're not here to draw lines, although we're saying that it has to go, 3 of the districts go to, well, we already are drawing lines, aren't we, by doing that?
Yeah.
And you know, by saying that, no, we're not looking at a minority question. We are looking at the question of whether disadvantaged people will have better representation in single-member districts or not, and they won't. In my opinion, they won't. And if you look at who the disadvantaged are in Alachua County, who are they? Mostly the minorities. Is that correct? Well, I think it is, to some degree. But, you know, to me, I think you need to be looking at what it will do to disenfranchise people with that right to vote within single-member districts versus the ability to vote for 5. You know, Commissioner Martin said that he thinks all the small towns are in favor of single-member districts, and, you know, I was listening to the President's speech, commencement speech he gave at the University of Michigan, and he quoted one of the legislators, congressman, and he said, everyone has an opinion, but not everyone should have their own facts. And I don't believe that the people in the rural areas of the small towns are in favor of single-member districts, because I've asked them. I've talked to people because I asked 2 questions. Are you in favor of a single-member district? Most of the people reply yes. The second question is, do you realize this will give you the right to vote for 1 commissioner versus your right to vote for 5? When you tell them that, then they begin to start evaluating that and say, no, I'm not in favor of single-member districts. So I think the question really revolves around a person's right to vote once again, and also the ability of people, if we go to single-member districts, we're looking at groups of people who are going to have a different political dynamic now in the county. And that concerns me a lot, too. We talked about a person's ability now to not have to raise so much money. But you know that if that's the case, that the special interests are going to look at a single-member district and pour lots of assets into electing the candidate of their choice, because it'll be a lot easier in a single-member district to do that versus a countywide election. But again, I go back to the same question time and time again. Why would I want to give up my right to vote for 5 commissioners versus 1? Do I think that that person, if elected, will represent me any better? You know, I looked back at that quote from, was it Lee County, where the person got up and said, why should I give up my right to vote for 5 people that not only I can elect, but also tax me and spend my money? I want to have a voice in how they do that, and all 5 of them. And to me, I've heard nothing yet that convinces me that it's going to represent Evanston or Micanopy or the east side of Gainesville any better than what we have now. I haven't heard that argument yet. So, you know, we can go on debating this, but Commissioner Martin, I still haven't heard the argument yet that convinces me otherwise. I just haven't heard that.
Well, since you're addressing it straight to me, I would have to say that in my view, no offense meant, your evidence has been no more than your thought as well. And so when you turn around and say that you've asked them, but that would imply that I have not, I take exception to that. I have never questioned your opinion as to a fact. I'm not sitting here telling you that I have a string of facts, but you have given no facts either.
No,
you have only given your opinion, which is what you did, and you criticized me for lack of facts. All I'm saying is your argument is just an emotional one as well.
All right, well, let's hold it right there.
Mr. Chair.
Let me hold on a second. Let's I think one thing we should never do is question anybody's motives, their beliefs, their feelings, whatever it is. I think that's why we're all there's 15 of us. They didn't appoint one of us.
I never started it,
So
but
I
I won't let it
understand.
go.
I understand. And I'm saying this to all of us up here, because as we get down to the nitty gritty here, things are getting.
Mr. Chair, you've got to admit this is a good dialogue.
It is, and we've
That's
been.
the reason. That's the reason we should put this on the ballot.
And we've been waiting on that for a long time to have the dialogue, I know. And but I just don't want it to get personal. We've got a long way to go here. Let me recognize Mr. Grundy, and then I'll go to Mr.
I think, and a lot of folks may agree with this statement, race is really, really a touchy subject in this country. It is very touchy, and it's one that I, as a person of 2 backgrounds, I'm an American. I fought for this country for 8 years. I'm proud of that. And to come back and see that we still are having this topic in the 21st century is sad, really sad. But again, I'm going to look at this issue for what it is. I'm not even going to address or touch that issue because, like I said before, this is about arithmetic. Why do I want to give up my right to vote for 5 for 1? So anybody can quote me on that. My mother's calling me. Sorry, Mom, can't talk right now. But no, listen, I wanted to really address something differently, is that I wanted to address the single-member districts issue in the city of Gainesville. If you're a resident in the city of Gainesville, I heard folks say that it increases voter turnout. It has not increased voter turnout. It has not increased participation. I am not, and I'll be clear on this, I'm not in favor of single-member districts in the city of Gainesville. I'm not in favor of nonpartisan elections in the city of Gainesville. I'll say it for the record. Why? Take it for folks that ever ran in a race in the city of Gainesville. Anybody that has run for office in the city of Gainesville knows, and even the folks that ran for office, ran for mayor. Look at this last mayoral race. As contentious as it was, if you were part of a political persuasion, you were called out. Good, bad, or indifferent, that's not necessarily the underlying issue, but I mean, I'm one of those folks that at least tells you and is honest with folks about at least where I stand. You may not agree with me, but the other thing is this. I agree with Commissioner Woods, is that I have asked for the last 8 months. If you have an argument that's rational and logical, has nothing to do with race, I don't want to get into the emotional aspects. If you have a logical argument that can convince me to change my vote, I welcome your input. To date, as of right now, this hour, I have not gotten that. Not about race, not about, this, it's good. I don't have representation. Logical arguments. Convince me to give up the right, and others to give up their right to vote for 5 commissioners, because that is part of inclusion. They get to, and if you don't like the political persuasion on you can vote for all 5 of them to get the heck out. That's your right. And I am so big on the right to vote. Again, I fought for that right, and anybody that served, we have Memorial Day coming up, fought for that right. And I don't mean to make this emotional, but let's move beyond this, Mr. Chair. I want this commission to move beyond the issue of race. It is taboo, and we need to change the dynamics of this discussion. Yes, granted, there is folks that live in East Gainesville and other areas that, it is about race, and folks may disagree with that statement. It is about equality, though. I want equity. I want equity when it comes to the right to vote. That is what this is about, and it also is about arithmetic. Why give up the right to vote for 5 for 1? I'll close. I really promise I will.
Mr. Brinkman.
I agree with Commissioner Grundy. Why give up the right to vote for 5 for 1? And also, it occurs to me that a lot can happen in 8 years. And I think, Mr. Woods, another question to ask people is, are you prepared to only be able to vote for one county commissioner, every 8 years? I think this is so diminishing people's right to representation that it is really appalling that people support it. And why people support it? Well, the reason I heard, the reason on this Tea Party document here is to advantage a specific political ideology. Conservatives who simply do not have the numbers in this county. They're trying to get more power than their numbers deserve. And for that, we're going to get to vote for one commissioner every 8 years. I think that's ridiculous.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Anyone that has not spoken?
Can I call the question?
You can, but I was recognizing Mr. Martin here first. If you'll go ahead and...
We voted to reconsider, but we didn't vote
We haven't voted on the question.
We haven't voted on the issue yet.
So we're on the issue now. Go ahead. Mr. Martin.
I have to say this. We were talking about what evidence do we have one way or the other. And I guess I have to invoke Commissioner Woods and Commissioner Martin, which is they've both been accused of just stating their opinion. By nature of the proposal, it's a fact that only an individual in that district will be able to vote for that one commissioner. That's not an opinion. That's a fact. All right. Now, what is debatable is whether or not an individual voted from that particular district would better represent the values or the notions of what that particular district wants to happen. I think we heard that the numbers and those undertones that I was referring to earlier, that some individuals in the community, some individuals in the black community think there's some sinister motive behind this. There has been no specific fact to say that once we have that commissioner in there, that only quote-unquote rural voters would elect that single member district, a member of that single member district, because as has been pointed out by Commissioner Ferguson, most of the voters are going to be in that rural area. So the one fact that we actually know is that you're only going to be able to vote for one commissioner, which kind of goes to the argument, Commissioner Woods, is that individuals are going to be disenfranchised or not have the same level of voting power that they have now. And unless someone can tell me that's not the case, that's the one fact we're sure of.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comments. Further comments before we call the question on this to see whether it'll go forward to, and the motion basically is that then we send it to our attorney to work this up and to come back and for our county staff to provide as much information as they could in the interim, just like all the other proposals. So that's where we are at this time. So are we ready to vote? Any further questions, anything? If not, I would ask Mary then to call the roll. This is on the actual question whether or not to put the proposal back on the list and refer it to our attorney.
Mr. Ackerman?
No.
Mr. Brinkman?
No.
Ms. Ferguson? No. Mr. Glazer? Mr. Grundy, I'll come back to him.
Okay.
Mr. Irby?
Yes.
Mr. Little?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
No.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Richards?
No.
Mr. Stringfellow?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
No.
Mr. York?
Yes.
We have 8 yes votes without Mr. Grundy.
Okay. Then record the vote as 8-6 at this time. Mr. Grundy out of the room. All right, thank you very much. Are there other motions or proposals to come before the board tonight?
I have a question.
Yes, sir, Mr. Wood.
On question number 7, when I worked at the University of Florida in a communications unit, we did a survey on reading levels, or rather we had one done, and we saw that most people in the state of Florida read at the 8th or 9th grade level. We also know that most people are opposed to government at this time. You know, that's an opinion, that's not a fact, but that's what I've read more than anything else. Putting the word abolishing constitutional officers sounds like everybody's going to say yes to that without considering what we're asking. Can we restructure that to get rid of the abolishing part? Because I don't think anybody's going to read the rest of it, or most people won't. So it kind of seems like everybody's going to look at that and say, yeah, this is my opportunity to get rid of government, so we'll abolish it.
Let me study that a little bit more. I use the word abolish because that's the constitutional word, but I can see what you're saying. It's inflammatory
word, yeah.
in a way,
And
inflammatory.
it may be restructured so that
Yes.
the abolishing comes after replacing or something along those
Mhm,
lines. Because I think that when people read that, most people are going to vote yes without considering what it says.
I'll do that.
Mary, if without objection, Mr. Grundy's asked we record a vote of no on that previous question.
Yes.
Is that request? Okay. All right. Mr. Grundy, you're recognized.
Yes, Mr. Chair, since the League of Cities has come before us, I wanted to make a motion. With the revisions that were made in the language, the ballot language, they attempted to compromise. I'd like to make a motion to utilize the language and revisions that they used to press upon. I want to make a motion to approve that language and send it forth to the ballot, or for our next public hearing, or for further wordsmithing, if you all want to do that, that as well. I want to use their revised language to send forward to the attorney to look at, and that's my motion.
Okay. Is there a second that we substitute the league's revised proposal?
Can I ask a question first? I thought I heard a couple of the speakers say that they wanted to have some time to work out the language, work the language a little bit more. Is that?
Well, they would still have this. We're just substituting
Okay.
what's going to be there.
Okay.
It isn't an end all yet, but let me make sure we've got a second on this. This is a substitute the league's revised proposal language for the language that our attorney has provided us as far as the proposal. Is that number 7?
Number 7.
No.
Old number 7.
Old number, yeah. What is it now?
It's not.
I'm sorry, I've got it.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's
Question 3, isn't it?
3?
Okay, 3.
3, that's right.
Question 3.
I'm sorry.
I think we all know what we're talking about there. But anyway, that's the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we substitute the league's revised proposal for our council's proposal, and that becomes the working draft that we're working off of. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, isn't that already understood? Isn't the Alachua League of Cities and the attorney, weren't they working on this to work out language anyway?
No.
We expect that they'll be.
Attorney signaling no.
Well, the league can certainly provide us any information they want to provide us, and this just becomes the working basis. But if this becomes a proposal, they might not have any other proposals. I can't, and it may be that then one of us come up with a different proposal, or our attorney.
So if I understand it, the motion is to work on the language?
No.
The motion will be that will become the working document language at this time. Certainly, our attorney can make recommendations on it, but that will be what is substituted on the proposed resolution that we'll be considering next time. Mr. Brinkman.
Mr. Chair, at the beginning of the meeting, I stated I could support Amendment 3, but specifically, or Question 3, specifically only as drafted by our attorney. And the primary reason for that is specifically because of the idea that it is improper for a charter amendment to constrain future charter amendments. the fact is, as an elector of Alachua County, I have the right under the state constitution to vote on a charter amendment which applies throughout the county. This is not the charter of a confederation of cities in Alachua County. It is the charter of the Alachua County government, which is the county government throughout the entire territory of the county.
Thank you very much. Mr. Grundy.
Everything has already been said, Mr. Chair. Motion to question.
Mr. Chairman, everything hasn't been said.
Okay.
May-
There's no
I'd like to speak. And I'm going to speak quite bluntly. This matter has probably taken half the time of this commission in the last 8 months. This matter is a total nothing, a total nothing. This matter will achieve nothing. Nobody that has stood here and told us why they wanted to do it has given us any reason to do it. We're told about horses. Who in this county has proposed anything about horses? So it is a false issue. And it's not being driven from Alachua County. It's being driven from somewhere else. And we've had this person from somewhere else come to every meeting, and I'm really confused about why that is. I am all in favor of home rule. But in this instance, given what we have got, if we had this thing in some version, it would make it impossible to add Amendment 1 in a way that would protect the citizens of Alachua County. If the city of High Springs decided it wanted to have the most polluting industry in the country in High Springs, and the people of Alachua County said, well, we want to have a charter amendment that, in fact, is going to let the county commission have a rule that will trump the High Springs Commission's rule, we couldn't do it. And this proposal then would not permit that to be done. The matter is not constitutional. Your attorney has told you that. And to waste any more time on this matter, I think, is just doing a disservice to the people in the county. One of the reasons we haven't been able to develop more information that some of the members would like on things like single-member districts and their effects and nonpartisan elections and their effects is we've had our attorney working on this thing, spending money on this thing. So I urge us to vote no here on this motion, and ultimately, of course, to vote no on the issue when it comes forward. This is a nothing issue that should not even occupy any of the time of this committee.
We appreciate those comments. Further comments before we call the vote? Seeing none, Mary, would you call the roll, please?
I'm sorry.
Mr.
I
Martin.
just wanted clarification. We're voting on the present language?
We're voting to substitute the league's revised proposal for the current language that Ms. Blakely has proposed.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
Are we okay on that?
No.
Okay.
I got point four. One more time, Mr.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. We're voting on.
We're voting to, Mr. Grundy's motion was to substitute the league revised proposal for the proposal, the ballot language that the CRC Council provided us in her legal opinion and with a proposed resolution. So we substitute that. Okay. Yes, sir, Bob.
Good. We've had an opinion, and I guess this is a question for Mr. Grundy Gomez. We've had an opinion from our attorney that this substitute language, regardless of the issue of, I'm just, includes transfers or limits in municipal service function, power, or authority. And we've already had an opinion that says that those are things that are already in the charter, they're already in the state constitution, and so if we put this on the ballot the way that this is worded, it will rightly be challenged that it's misleading because it implies that they don't currently have this power. And certainly for people who vote against it, they will assume that we will be taking that power away. and that's not true. So I mean, this is, to me, very broad, and I would urge us to vote no.
Thank you for your comments. All right, Mary, call the roll. This is on the question to substitute the league revised proposal.
Mr. Ackerman?
No.
Mr. Brinkman?
No.
Ms. Ferguson? Mr. Glazer?
Yes.
Mr. Grundy?
Yes.
Mr. Irby?
No.
Mr. Little?
No.
Mr. Martin?
No.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Richards?
No.
Mr. Stringfellow?
No.
Mr. Tuttle?
No.
Ms. Martin?
No.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
And Mr. York?
Yes.
Announce the vote, please.
I have 5
Certainly
yes,
isn't a voting block down here.
10 no.
Okay. Record then 5 yeses and 10 noes. The motion fails. Are there other motions anyone like? There?
Point of clarification. So the language drafted by our council is
That's what
the
goes
language
forward to
which
the
would go on the
next
ballot
public
if we
hearing.
do approve it, right?
The next
Okay.
public hearing. That's correct.
We still, as I spoke before, will we still be able to, and I still feel the way I spoke before, try to work with council on the language that are still are.
Certainly, you're welcome to write me and I'll pass it on to the council, or to write the county commission at Mary's Lowry, and she'll get it to the council either way. And we're happy to have any of your comments that you would like to make.
And one other clarification. The Florida League of Cities representative is here at our request because we don't have the funding and the resources, and we are all members of that organization. And as part of those,
Okay.
the membership of that organization, they respond to our request, and that is why they're here. They're not here just getting into our.
Okay, we appreciate that very much. Thank you for the clarification. Just because he wasn't at the mic, he was, the mayor of Micanopy there was saying that the League of Cities representative is here at the request of the local League of Cities, and that's why she's here. So appreciate that clarification. Is there other business to come before the commission
Yes,
tonight?
Mr. Chair. I would like to make a motion.
Mr. Martin.
I would like to make a motion that this commission solicit the assistance of an expert in election affairs to give some report to this commission on the ramifications of single-member districts, specifically addressing some of the issues that Commissioner Little brought up as far as specifically, but as the anything, mainly thrusting towards the feasibility of single-member district as compliance with the Voters' Right Act. Could it expose us to any particular litigation? Can we have some report to that?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we engage expert. There's several at the University of Florida, needless to say, that would be willing to come and testify on single-member districts and the implications and overall aspects
Good idea.
of the thing. Okay, it's been moved and seconded on that. Do you want to say anything else since you're making the motion, or you think it's out there clear?
Unless somebody
Okay.
thinks it's a
All
bad
right.
idea.
All right. Anyone? Mr. Richards.
Mr. Chair, when they do bills like this in the legislature and you vote on them, there's a fiscal impact statement. I don't know if we have a budget. Is it going to cost us money to hire somebody?
Yes, we do.
We'll contact Professor Wall probably first. I have in my packet here everything that he delivered to the city of Gainesville in the last 10 years or so, and so it should be fairly easy for him to put something together. If there is a fiscal impact, then we have a budget, and the answer to your question is yes. If there is one, then we will figure out a way to pay for that.
So that's not a consideration.
Well, if it was, which
Money
I
is
don't
no object,
anticipate.
in other
No, I don't want to use that term because it's coming out of the general fund, which I can tell
There
you
is no money in the general fund.
But needless to say, we do have a budget. The county commission anticipated we'd have expenses, and so we will certainly, if this motion is agreed to, we will certainly work as best we can to get it.
Mr. Chair, I do have a follow-up motion.
Okay, we'll come back to you in just a minute. Mr. John Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not opposed to getting more information to make decisions, and I don't, quite frankly, don't know Mr. Wall. If he's a Gator, he's probably pretty sharp, but I don't know him. But my only concern is, there's two concerns. One, and maybe unfairly so, because I say I don't know him, I've not read his works. But I do read, by the way. But I have not read his works. But he has been cited numerous times as being an evidence opposed to single-member districts. He has been used. I'm not saying he has. His words have been used in front of us by people. I think Mayor Hanrahan, former Mayor Hanrahan, actually read some comments or quoted some comments from him that were opposed, that did not, I won't say opposed, but showed the detriments, if there are, to single-member districts. So I'm concerned, like I say, I don't know this gentleman, but there's two things. I'm concerned that you know, if we're going to, how we're going to make sure we're getting an evenly weighted issue, and if we are in fact going to spend taxpayer money, then it needs to be the same way we hired an attorney. It needs to be evaluated and those types of things. Quite frankly, I think our attorney has told us that people talk about smoke screens, has told us that single-member districts are constitutional. It has been done in the state of Florida. So when I understand, but you're talking about the words that were used in the motion were viability. That was the word that was used, which implies that there may be some reasons why you could not do it, that it may violate something.
I think maybe we should let him do that.
Can I at least please finish? I do not interrupt y'all when you talk. That's true. All I'm saying is that this person has been cited as being an example of someone who has a predisposition opposed to single-member districts. I'm not saying he does. I'm saying it's been cited here and even quoted by members of this commission earlier tonight. So you're talking about hiring someone who may, in fact, have a predisposed opinion.
Well, whoever.
All I'm saying is that we need to be careful that we're not trying to set up a situation because I don't want to hire people just to promote my particular beliefs or yours. I'd like to see it be neutral. I'm not saying this gentleman's not capable of that, but just to name that person as the person we want to have, after what has been said, I don't think is appropriate.
If this motion is agreed to, I can assure you that we will impress upon that person that it be an impartial, general overview of the pros and cons and any other questions.
And I assure you, I have no bias against this gentleman, and he's very capable, I'm
We
sure,
just know he's been
of
used by the
presenting
city
both
of-
arguments, but he's been cited on one side of it here.
We know that he's provided consultancy to the city of Gainesville for a number of years on this issue, so he has some expertise. But again, he might not be available, so we will have to go from there.
Mr. Chairman.
I'll come back to you, Mr. Brinkman.
Real quickly, I believe what Mayor Hanrahan and other members of this commission said is Mr. Ken Wald said that he doubted that 3 districts going to the county line could be drawn that would be compliant with the law on districting. He actually is, and I think it's been in our backup, favors single-member districts. It's just the requirement that 3 districts go to the line. And to that issue, I would like to ask our attorney to look into the legality of specifying in the charter the nature of the districts. I believe it is not legal to specify that 3 go to the county.
Why don't you add that as an amendment to the motion so we can...
I'd be happy to.
Second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded that we add an amendment to the motion that our attorney also give us an opinion on placing constraints on the way the county commission
That would be great if we could
would,
do that.
do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Take the
Any
politics
questions
out
on
of
the
it.
amendment first? Mr. Little.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like clarification of the motion, which I support. First of all, I think included in the motion is the notion of if there's any reason to be concerned that this would create a barrier to the election of a black, specifically a black candidate. The second thing I would like to suggest is that if Mr. Wald or whoever does this should believe that there's something wrong with the 3 to the county line plan, then to ask him to, well, what are just about single-member districts, period, without driving them to the county plan? Could he give us an evaluation on that? And if that's, may I ask whether that's properly within the ambit of the assignment here?
What we would do is ask whoever does this to watch this portion of the meeting and try to address as many questions as possible that we have brought forward.
Okay. Because I think one of the things that our members would want to consider, if somebody would come back and say, well, the way you've got it drafted, including 3 to the line, won't work, the question is, would we want to consider something else?
And that amendment would certainly be in order at the appropriate time. So right now, the amendment that's before us is to add to the motion, the main motion, that we also request our attorney to provide us information on whether or not putting those constraints of 3 or districts extending to the county line is within the law. Okay. Seeing no other hands up, those in favor of the amendment say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment carries. Now before you is the motion as amended, which is by Mr. Broncy Martin, which is to engage an expert on elections and single-member districts and have him make a presentation, or him or her, that's right, presentation, I appreciate that, presentation on the questions that have been put before us here today. Any questions, or Mr. Martin?
Thank you. I just want to make it clear, I'm not opposed to Professor Wall.
I understand.
I'm not
We appreciate
opposed
that.
to him.
We all want it. We
Make
want
that clear. I'm not opposed to the gentleman.
Let's move on.
We want it. We want it to be an impartial presentation. I think being a professor, or whoever,
woman,
they
I
will
heard she's
understand.
good looking.
This meeting's getting out of order now. All right, those in favor of the motion as amended, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion carries. There's a further business come before the commission.
Please. No.
I did finish. I wanted a
Yes,
follow-up
sir.
motion. This may be answering a simple question. The timing for this presentation, is it assumption that this is going to take place at the next public hearing?
That's the assumption.
All right. And if anyone thinks this needs to be made, I am concerned that due to the lateness of the hour that these meetings run, and just the general agitation of people sitting in one place, is it necessary to designate a specific amount of time to not only hear the presentation, but allow anyone who may have any rebuttal or any specific presentation for that? Or we're just going to kind of see how it goes? Well, what I'm concerned, I don't want this to be dictated by I got to go.
What we will do is, with the permission of the board here, is we will try to identify one backup date beyond the current scheduled public hearing, should we need that, when the television and so forth is available to us, which has been a difficult situation for us. But we will make sure that we have at least one backup date should we need that. But I would encourage all the members to come to the next public hearing and business session of the commission ready to work as long as we need to. If we run out of gas, then we will certainly do something different. But we will identify a backup just in case. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Grundy.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Been moved and seconded that we adjourn. Are there any other? Okay. Without that, I would just announce that the next public hearing is June the 9th, 2010, in this place at 5:30. We thank you all for coming.
Yeah.
And this meeting is adjourned.
That is a wonderful.